just because Jack casually pulled out a 10,000 denomination nether dollar while taking a cab. The ghost taxi driver was scared half to death on the spot. After all, there was no way he could make change for a bill that large. You had to understand, on a ghost taxi, the moment a driver broke the rules and overcharged a passenger, death was guaranteed. And yet, Jack still had more than 900 million bills just like that in his possession. It all began a month earlier, when the paranormal descended upon the world, and nether dollars became the only hard currency left. With $100, you could drive a limited edition Bugatti whenever you wanted. With 10,000, even a cold, gorgeous ghost would fight to call you husband. As for the spatial ring on Jack's hand, it contained the entire Nether Federal Bank. At that moment, the streets were completely deserted in the dead of night, and Jack stood alone by the roadside, scanning the area for a taxi. After waiting a full 5 minutes, a classic yellow Ford Crown Victoria finally rolled slowly toward him. But before he could even raise a hand to stop it, the car had already pulled over beside him on its own. The moment he got in, Jack caught a faint scent of blood in the air, and on the rear window, there were several bloody handprints, flickering in and out of sight. Then, all of a sudden, the driver jerked the wheel and turned straight into a pitch-black alley in Brooklyn. And that was obviously not the direction of the Midnight Diner. Jack immediately questioned the driver, asking if he had taken the wrong road. But the driver only bared his teeth in a grin and said it was a shortcut even the living didn't know about. At the same time, the car's speed began climbing like mad, shooting from 80 miles per hour to 100 in no time. Drawing on the experience from his previous life, Jack almost instantly concluded that this was the infamous ghost taxi. As one of the paranormal scenarios, it still offered a chance to survive, as long as you did not break the rules. And the rules themselves were actually pretty simple. If a passenger had nether dollars on them, they simply paid the fare. If not, they had to jump out before the speed fully ramped up. Because when a ghost taxi first started moving, its speed actually wasn't that high. Even jumping out would only cause minor injuries, not death. But once the speed kept climbing, by the time it reached the destination, it could even break the sound barrier. And once it came to that, there were only two endings left: jump and die on impact, or get devoured alive by the ghost driver. By now, the taxi had already blown past 120 miles per hour, and at that moment, the driver spoke again. "We're almost there. Pay up. $10,000. He was obviously convinced that to a living human, that was an outrageously huge sum. But Jack simply sat there calmly in the car, not moving an inch. Seeing no reaction from him, the ghost driver immediately revealed a sinister grin. "If you don't pay, you're not getting out alive." The moment the words fell, he shot out a clawed hand and lunged straight at Jack. But Jack only stared at him coldly and said in an icy voice, "What makes you think I don't have money? If I really take it out, do you dare accept it?" As he spoke, Jack pulled out a 10,000 denomination nether dollar. The ghost driver's eyes instantly widened. Just as Jack had expected, the driver's eyes were full of greed, yet he still didn't dare accept the money. Jack let out a cold laugh. A ride that lasted only a few minutes was nowhere near worth $10,000. The moment he accepted it, he would be openly violating the rules. That so-called $10,000 fare was nothing more than a bluff the ghost driver used to scare passengers. Once a passenger was truly intimidated by it and gave up on paying because they couldn't come up with that much money, the ghost driver could kill them fair and square. The ghost driver never imagined that this harmless-looking young man in front of him was actually a ruthless player who understood the rules of the paranormal world inside and out. In the end, he could only honestly state the real fare, $11 in total. But even after paying, Jack had no intention of getting out right away. Instead, he pulled out another $10,000 bill. Want it? The ghost driver instinctively assumed Jack was humiliating him on purpose. After all, nether dollars were unbelievably precious to humans. How could he possibly be willing to hand one over so casually? But Jack only gave a faint smile. "Be my driver. I'll pay you $20,000 a month. Do a good job, and there'll be performance bonuses too." In the paranormal apocalypse, ghost taxis were absolutely one of the best means of transportation available. The reason was simple. Before reaching the destination, the ghost domain created by the taxi could protect its passengers from attacks by any other paranormal beings. Hearing that, the driver's face froze in shock. Driving this ghost taxi only earned him a little over $3,000 a month, and even then, Manhattan gangs often delayed his pay. But now his salary was about to increase nearly tenfold, and all he had to do was serve Jack alone. How could a job this good even exist? A moment later, He looked at Jack with doubtful, uncertain eyes. Seeing that he was still hesitating, Jack pulled $60,000 out of his spatial ring. I can pay you 3 months in advance. The ghost driver could hardly believe his luck could be this ridiculously good. Just by running into a generous Wall Street tycoon, he had been hired on the spot as a private chauffeur. As soon as the contract was signed, the ghost taxi officially became Jack's exclusive ride. The ghost driver eagerly handed over a black BlackBerry phone. He then explained that there was a red button on it. As long as Jack pressed that button anywhere in the city, he would arrive within 5 minutes. After dismissing the driver, Jack walked straight into the Midnight Diner. Along with him, several sorority girls had also been chosen. Welcome to the Midnight Diner. At that moment, the restaurant manager, Lilith, slowly stepped forward. To ensure that your work goes smoothly, you must strictly follow the rules below. First, you must obey my orders unconditionally. Second, everyone who comes here to spend money is a customer. No matter what a customer asks for, you must satisfy them without exception. That rule applies even to me. Lastly, your working hours will last 2 hours. During that time, you are not allowed to leave the restaurant, nor are you allowed to damage any property inside it. Otherwise, you will face extremely severe punishment. After changing into aprons and work uniforms, Lilith led them into a private room and told them to serve the customer inside well. There, a paranormal creature was sitting with its head lowered, drinking cream of clam soup. Thick soup dripped from the corner of its mouth all the way onto the table. Suddenly, it raised a hand and pointed at Mia, the head cheerleader. "You, come here and wipe this soup off." Mia instantly turned pale with fear, and her body unconsciously pressed closer to Jack. In a pitiful voice, she pleaded, "Jack, I'm scared. Can you help me?" As a fellow student from the same high school, Jack knew exactly what kind of person Mia was. She looked innocent and sweet on the outside, but underneath, she was deeply calculating. She used her looks to keep several football players hanging on at the same time, and as for making Jack die in her place, she could forget it. Mia had clearly thought she could handle Jack just as easily as she had back at school. But Jack wasn't buying any of it this time. A trace of resentment immediately flashed through her eyes. But with no other choice, she could only take a deep breath, grit her teeth, and walk toward the creature. She forced herself to wipe its mouth clean, but the disgusting stench nearly made her throw up on the spot. The creature seemed quite pleased and casually pulled out another dollar from its pocket. "This is your tip." Mia's eyes lit up at once. In paranormal missions, money could solve a lot of problems. Sometimes, it could even grant leniency after breaking the rules. Just last week, a $100 bill had been sold on the black market for an outrageous $1 million US. Looking at the $10 bill in her hand, Mia felt as if she had just been handed a protective charm. She even started to think she was no longer on the same level as Jack and the others, who had nothing on them. But right then, the creature suddenly picked up a plate and said, "I'm done with this dish. Take the empty plate away from me." Still caught up in her excitement, Mia didn't hesitate for even a second, and immediately took the plate and started walking out. She never noticed the foot the creature quietly stretched out in front of her. Sure enough, in the very next second, she stumbled and crashed to the floor. The plate in her hands shattered instantly. Hearing the noise, Lilith rushed in at once, her gaze sweeping across the mess all over the floor. She sharply pointed her right index finger at the group standing around the broken pieces. "Who broke the plate?" Mia's face turned deathly pale in an instant. She hurriedly looked toward the creature sitting by the table. It was obvious that it had tripped her on purpose, just to enjoy the show. Then she turned to look at Jack, who was standing not far away. The broken plate just happened to be lying right by his feet. Gritting her teeth, Mia immediately pointed at Jack and shouted, "It was him. Jack broke the plate." Jack frowned, not expecting this woman to be shameless to such an extent. But he knew very well that the moment Mia tried to pin the blame on him, she was already doomed. Lilith's eyes turned sharp at once. "Do you take me for a fool? Every private room has a surveillance eye shaped like an eyeball, watching your every move. I saw exactly what you did." The moment her frame-up failed, Mia's legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. But in the very next second, she suddenly reacted and hurriedly pulled out the tip she had just received. "I have nether dollars. I'll pay for the broken plate." Lilith let out an eerie smile. "Are you sure you want to use the money in your hand to pay for it?" Mia nodded frantically, terrified that Lilith might change her mind. When she saw Lilith actually take the bill, Mia finally let out a breath of relief, thinking she had survived. But Jack merely shook his head, knowing she had just missed her final chance to stay alive. Sure enough, Before Mia could celebrate for more than a few seconds, Lilith's tone turned cold again. Unfortunately, your money isn't enough. This plate costs $20. For the rest, I'll take half your body as payment. Mia's eyes widened instantly. Fear and despair flooded her heart at once. Meanwhile, the creature by the table watched the whole scene with clear satisfaction. The other sorority girls were all terrified out of their minds as well. Only then did they fully realize that these creatures genuinely took pleasure in getting players killed, and the restaurant's favoritism toward its customers had reached an outrageous level. Even if it was the customer who deliberately tripped them and caused the plate to break, they were still the ones forced to pay for it in the end. Just then, the creature suddenly pulled out another $10 bill and looked toward Jack. "Come here. This is your tip." Several of the girls couldn't help but gasp. Clearly, the creature had no intention of stopping. It had already chosen its second victim. A smug, vindictive smile even appeared on Mia's face. To her, as long as Jack died with her, it would feel like revenge. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the creature picked up another plate and slammed it straight to the floor. Then it pointed at the shattered pieces and said to Lilith, "This plate is broken. I want this kid to pay for it." Looking at the creature's shameless behavior, Valerie, the student council president, finally couldn't hold back anymore. Jack didn't break that plate. It's unfair to make him pay for it. But Lilith didn't even spare her a glance. You obey every command given by the customer. If the customer says you pay for the broken plate, then you pay for it. Yet Jack, standing to the side, remained unusually calm the entire time. He casually pulled out that $10 bill and held it out directly in front of Lilith. Lilith planted her hands on her hips and looked down at him. $10 isn't enough to cover that plate. Jack only gave a cold smile. Who said I was using it to pay for the plate? The girls all looked at each other in confusion. Is he seriously going to confront the ghost manager head-on? Has he lost his mind? At those words, Lilith immediately extended her claws, ready to tear Jack to pieces. "If you won't pay, then you die." But to everyone's surprise, Jack broke into a bright smile. "Bring me your menu. I'd like to order something." At that moment, the girls were convinced Jack had been scared stupid. At a time like this, he was still thinking about ordering food. But very soon, they noticed that Lilith's expression changed slightly. Jack lifted his eyes to Lilith. "Bring me an order of fries worth $10. The rules say that anyone who comes here to spend money is a customer. And since I'm a customer, I refuse to pay for that plate." Lilith never imagined that Jack would see through the hidden way to survive this mission at a single glance. The moment Mia saw what was happening from the floor, she finally realized it too. She immediately shouted at Lilith, "Give me back my $10. I'm not paying for it anymore. I want to order food too." But to her surprise, Lilith rejected her outright. Once the money has been handed over, there is absolutely no refund. Unwilling to accept that, Mia turned and pointed at Jack as she shouted, "Jack, you already knew how to deal with this. Why didn't you tell me, you bastard?" Jack only responded with a cold smile. "The moment you tried to pin the blame on me, you were already dead. Did you forget the first rule? You must carry out the manager's orders faithfully." But when she asked who broke the plate, you lied to her. Jack's words immediately made even Lilith look surprised. Such sharp attention to detail made it clear that this man was no ordinary person. But just as Lilith turned to leave, Jack suddenly called out to stop her. "Bring your boss here. I have something to discuss with him." Lilith's expression instantly turned serious. "Our boss does not show himself so easily. If you have any requests, you can tell me. I'll do my best to satisfy them." Jack only smiled at that. "Then what if I want to buy your restaurant?" The moment those words left his mouth, Lilith froze on the spot. A mere human actually daring to say he wanted to buy the Midnight Diner was sheer madness. Still, she quickly replied, "The rules do require me to satisfy every request from a customer, but something like selling the Midnight Diner is beyond my authority." In Lilith's eyes, Jack was clearly just trying to use his status as a customer to swindle the Midnight Diner out of their hands for free. But Jack simply waved his hand. "You misunderstood what I meant. I'm saying I want to buy your restaurant with nether dollars." Lilith looked Jack up and down. Yes, the diner was doing badly and was already on the verge of collapse. But buying the entire place would still require well over $10 million. How could a mere human possibly come up with that kind of money? Seeing that Lilith still wasn't moved, Jack immediately pulled out a thick stack of bills from his spatial ring. Lilith's eyes widened in disbelief. That stack had to be worth at least $100,000, which was enough to equal 2 full years of her wages. Her attitude instantly turned respectful. "Mr. Jack, please wait a moment. I'll go bring our boss here right away." Even the ghoul customer suddenly became extremely uneasy. The Midnight Diner was not a high-end place at all right now, and the people who came to eat here were basically street-level nobodies. But 100,000 nether dollars was more than enough to hire someone to kill him 100 times over. The thought alone sent a chill down his spine. Not long after, a skeleton boss wearing a worn pinstripe suit walked into the private room. "Good evening, sir. I'm Tang, the owner of the Midnight Diner. I heard you want to buy this restaurant?" When Jack nodded, a trace of poorly hidden delight immediately appeared on the skeleton boss's face. The Midnight Diner had already been losing money for 5 straight years. He had wanted to dump this mess for a long time, but unfortunately, he had never been able to find anyone willing to take it off his hands. And now, this human had actually delivered himself to the door like a perfect sucker. So he immediately started pitching it to Jack. Although the diner is facing a few operational difficulties right now, the location is excellent. If you buy it now, you definitely won't regret it. But inwardly, Jack could only laugh. The man had no idea that 1 year into the paranormal apocalypse, as more and more paranormal beings appeared, the Midnight Diner would rise fast with the help of several newly hired top-tier chefs and its prime location, eventually becoming a massive powerhouse known far and wide, the Intercontinental Midnight Grand Hotel. Jack smiled. "I'm very optimistic about the Midnight Diner's future. Just name your price. 8 million or maybe 7 million, the skeleton boss asked cautiously. In truth, even with its current poor performance, the Midnight Diner itself was still worth 10 million on the market. The problem was simply that the losses had become far too severe. In order not to miss this rare chance to sell, he was willing to cut deep and get rid of it as fast as possible. But what he never expected was this. Jack not only agreed without hesitation, he even added another 500,000 and demanded that all the staff be retained. That completely stunned the boss. After all, he had already owed the employees more than half a year of unpaid wages, which came to at least 500,000. With this extra 500,000 added in, keeping the staff and paying back their wages would mean a full extra million. Originally, he had planned to grab his things and run, abandoning all those employees and leaving them to become wandering ghosts who would have to fend for themselves. The skeleton boss immediately bent at the waist and asked in a fawning tone, "Sir, then when do you plan to make the payment?" Jack slightly lifted his chin. "Right now." With that, he pulled out 7.5 million nether dollars from his spatial ring and placed them directly on the table. The skeleton boss's eyes bulged wide as he stared at the mountain of ghost currency before him in utter disbelief. He couldn't help muttering under his breath, "Are humans these rich now?" The moment Jack received the contract, he immediately felt an overwhelming surge of ghostly energy pour into him. So this was the power of rules, the force that stood above all other powers. And once those rules were violated, even an Abyss Lord would have to pay an unimaginably painful price. As soon as Jack signed his name, that powerful surge of ghostly energy instantly poured into his body. And in that very moment, Jack officially became the true supreme boss of the Midnight Diner. From that point on, whatever rules players had to follow would be decided by him alone. The sorority girls were all left staring in utter shock, because none of them had expected Jack to actually buy the Midnight Diner outright. Jack glanced at the time. It was now 1:04 a.m. Then he spoke in a calm voice. "From this moment on, I'm adding a 4th rule to this mission. As of 1:04 a.m., all players are allowed to leave the Midnight Diner, and leaving will count as completing the mission." In an instant, everyone became deeply grateful to Jack. After they left, he gathered every employee in the restaurant together. Once they learned that Jack not only intended to keep them on but also pay their overdue wages, every last one of them became wildly excited. Jack held nether dollars in one hand and contracts in the other, and began signing agreements one by one with the paranormal employees. Every time he completed one, he gained a degree of control over that employee. At the same time, he also took the chance to assess their strength. In general, paranormal beings could be divided into 5 ranks: Lord rank, Commander rank, Elite rank, Enforcer rank, and Civilian rank. And it was obvious that most of the paranormal staff in this restaurant were not particularly strong. Aside from Lilith and the 2 chefs who had barely reached Enforcer rank, the rest were basically all still at Civilian rank. Jack shook his head helplessly. He had originally planned to find a suitable paranormal being here and sign a long-term pact. But clearly, none of these were good enough. A contract like this could only take effect within a single paranormal scenario. Once the target left that scenario, the contract would immediately lose its power. If Jack wanted a paranormal being to obey him permanently, then the best method was still to sign a true binding pact. After wrapping up everything at the restaurant, Jack returned home under the escort of the ghost taxi. All the way back, he kept thinking through his next move, because right now, the paranormal apocalypse had only just begun. Many hidden items inside paranormal scenarios still had not been taken by anyone. In his previous life, some people had found rare Lord rank items and skyrocketed to power because of them. Meanwhile, Jack himself had only started exploring paranormal scenarios 2 years into the apocalypse. By then, nearly all the rare items had already been looted clean. Now that he had been reborn into the very first month of the paranormal apocalypse, there was no way he would make the same mistake again. At that moment, one place suddenly surfaced in Jack's mind. The Mist Metropolis Museum. A vampire duke's family resided there, each of them frighteningly powerful. Even the lowest attendants there possessed enforcer rank strength. The old British butler had already reached elite rank. As for the Duke himself, he was a genuine commander rank powerhouse. After all, in many smaller cities, the strongest paranormal being around was only commander rank at best. More importantly, hidden inside the Mist Metropolis Museum was also a commander rank item, the Reaper Heavy Tactical Body Armor. This item could not only block attacks from civilian ranked and enforcer rank enemies, it could even nullify one instance of damage caused by breaking a rule, with a cooldown of 1 full month. In his previous life, countless powerful figures had come for it by name, even after nearly dying again and again while completing missions for the Duke's family. None of them had managed to obtain it. In the end, some people couldn't hold back anymore and resorted to stealing and robbing it by force. But without a single exception, every one of them ended up dying at the Duke's hands. It was not until someone finally suggested buying it outright, with nether dollars, that everyone woke up as if from a dream. The Duke, after all, was nothing more than a fallen European noble, and what he needed most had always been money. So Jack immediately asked the driver where the nearest paranormal shopping mall was, planning to buy some gifts before paying the Duke a visit. Not long after, the ghost taxi came to a steady stop in front of Fallen Mall. The main entrance was smeared with a layer of bloody red handprints, enough to make anyone's skin crawl at a glance. The ghost driver took the initiative to explain that this was the most upscale large shopping center across several nearby cities. The instant Jack stepped inside, he felt the temperature around him plummet. It was so cold that he could not help but shiver slightly. Just then, a blonde woman in a business suit walked over with a bright smile on her face. "Welcome to Fallen Mall. How may I help you? But I should remind you of one thing. Do not even think about running. Once you enter this place, you can only leave after buying something." Jack merely gave a dry chuckle. "Don't play that game with me. If I'm not mistaken, the first rule of Fallen Mall is that customers who buy something are free to leave." A trace of impatience entered the woman's voice. "Since you already know that, why not hurry up and buy something?" To her surprise, Jack simply stroked his chin. "Hold on, let me think this through a little more. And if I'm not mistaken, even if I don't buy anything, I can still leave safely, right?" The moment she heard that, the woman's expression changed, and she looked at Jack with clear caution. Jack locked onto her with a sharp gaze. "I've seen this kind of rule trick far too many times in the paranormal apocalypse. The rules only say that if you buy something, you can leave. They never say that if you buy nothing, you can't. So the real killing rule should be the second one. If you don't have enough money to pay, you die in Fallen Mall. Am I right? With the way you pushed people, plenty of them probably forced themselves to choose an item. Too bad those people either didn't have any nether dollars at all, or the things they chose were absurdly expensive. And in the end, every last one of them fell straight into the trap you had prepared." The female ghost gave a helpless smile. "Sir, you really are smart. And yes, quite a few unlucky fools have died here. Since you've already seen through it, then please leave. I won't stop you." Jack shrugged. "What I said just now was only me warming up on you. I came here to buy something in the first place." He raised a hand, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Take me to the most expensive store you have." The ghost woman froze for a second, but after thinking it over, she figured that someone this smart and calm would never come here just to throw his life away. Even so, the priciest luxury stores here charged tens of thousands of nether dollars for even the smallest purchase. Deep down, she still had her doubts about whether Jack could actually afford any of it. Before long, the ghost woman led Jack up to the top floor on level 6. As she guided him along, she explained that everything here came from the Ghost World's version of Fifth Avenue luxury brands, and as long as you had money, you could buy anything. Jack thought to himself that in his previous life, he had once heard that the Duke owned a wine cabinet dedicated entirely to top-tier Bordeaux reds. But after falling on hard times, that cabinet had long since been emptied out. And if Jack could help fill it up again, he would definitely win the Duke's favor. With that in mind, Jack walked straight into a wine shop. A saleswoman immediately came up to greet him with a warm smile. "Sir, what kind of wine are you looking for? We have red wine, whiskey, and craft beer of every kind. If you'd like, we can even customize selections based on your personal taste." But her enthusiasm was clearly not out of simple politeness, because she had already decided that a mere human could never afford anything in this place. And as long as Jack died here, she would walk away with a huge sales commission. Jack waved a hand. "Pack out all your most expensive vintage red wines in gift boxes. I want 100 bottles. Hearing that, the saleswoman immediately sneered inwardly. What a clueless idiot. A single bottle here cost 10 to 20,000 nether dollars, and the most expensive ones went for 100,000 each. There was no way this kid could actually afford that. Even so, she quickly had all the wine packed up, just waiting for Jack to embarrass himself when he failed to pay. "Sir, your total comes to 2,300,000. Please make the payment. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll have to leave your head behind as collateral." Jack let out a dismissive laugh. "It's only 2,300,000. I can afford that much just fine." As he spoke, he casually pulled out 2,300,000 and placed it on the table. But the saleswoman did not even glance at it before saying, "Sir, we only accept nether currency here." Yet, Jack remained perfectly calm, without the slightest trace of panic. And when she finally looked down carefully, she realized that every last bill on the table was brand new nether cash. The paranormal apocalypse had only started a month ago. How could any human possibly have this much cash already? It took several full seconds before she finally snapped out of her shock. "Sir, please wait a moment. I'll go get our manager right away." After all, a transaction worth more than 2 million nether dollars was far beyond something a mere sales clerk could approve on her own, especially since the shop only had around 100 bottles in stock to begin with, and Jack's purchase had effectively bought out the entire store. In her memory, even the former owner of the Midnight Diner had not been willing to drink a single bottle of this level of red wine for over a year, and only the Vampire Duke at the height of his glory had ever been able to buy dozens of bottles in one go. 2 or 3 minutes later, the manager hurried over in a rush. In this shopping center, anyone who spent 1 million qualified as a silver tier customer, entitled to VIP treatment and personal service from the mall manager, while spending 2 million was enough to make someone a gold tier customer. Above that, there were also black card customers who spent more than 5 million, but even silver tier customers at Fallen Mall were already incredibly rare. Every single one of them was a powerful paranormal being in the city. As for gold tier customers, during the very first month of the paranormal apocalypse, even the strongest creatures could hardly spend 2 million within a single month, which made Jack, without question, the very first. "Mr. Jack, congratulations on becoming one of our gold tier customers. This is your VIP card." With that, the manager respectfully handed him a card, but Jack waved it off and refused. "Not yet. I'm not done buying. Where's the most expensive jewelry in this mall?" Hearing that, the manager didn't dare slack off in the slightest. He immediately had someone bring over the most expensive jewelry in the store. With a respectful smile, he explained, "This necklace is made from abyss blood diamonds. The price is 1 million. But Jack didn't even blink before telling him to wrap it up. Right after that, he casually bought several Rolex pocket watches as well. In barely half an hour, his spending had already passed 5 million. Watching Jack store everything away inside his spatial ring, the manager's eyes were practically overflowing with envy. A commander rank spatial item. This young man's background had to be extraordinary. No matter what, he absolutely could not afford to offend him. Meanwhile, Jack was already thinking that this shopping center was pretty good in its own right. So why not go all the way and buy the whole place outright? So he casually asked, "Is your boss around? I want to buy Fallen Mall. Go ask him how much he's willing to sell it for." The manager froze for a second. Then, a troubled expression immediately appeared on his face. "Our boss hasn't been here lately, but once he returns, I'll pass the message along to him right away. How about this? Let me issue you a Centurion Black Gold card first." Seeing the puzzled look on Jack's face, the manager quickly explained, "Our mall's membership cards are divided into 3 tiers, silver, gold, and black gold. And above those 3, there's an even higher level. The Supreme Black card is only issued to our most distinguished guests. Not only do they need to meet the spending requirement, they also need to have an exceptionally powerful background. More importantly, aside from shopping privileges, it also comes with additional rights. For example, it grants access to the Paranormal Survival Challenge hosted by Fallen Mall, and anyone who holds a Supreme Black card can even alter the rules of the challenge at will. At the same time, you would also have the authority to issue supplementary cards to other people whenever you want." Watching Jack come down from the 7th floor under the personal escort of the manager, The blonde saleswoman in the business suit was stunned, speechless. After all, the mall manager himself was already elite rank, a seriously formidable existence even among paranormal beings. She had originally assumed Jack was just some rich guy with a bit of money, but she never imagined his background ran this deep. For a moment, she even started regretting it, thinking that if she had known earlier, she should have leaned harder into her feminine charm and latched onto Jack while she had the chance. Outside Fallen Mall, the ghost driver had already been waiting for quite some time. Seeing that Jack still hadn't come out, he couldn't help starting to feel nervous. Don't tell me he bought too much, couldn't pay for it, and got detained by the mall. Just then, Jack finally walked out of the mall, and the driver saw the mall manager standing there with a whole group of salespeople, all bowing in unison toward Jack. "Farewell, Mr. Jack, honored Supreme Black Card guest. We look forward to your next visit." The ghost driver's heart skipped a beat on the spot, because as far as he knew, the highest tier card at Fallen Mall was only the Centurion Black Gold card, and even Tang, the former owner of the Midnight Diner, had only been silver tier at best. Yet his new boss had gone in for less than half a day and somehow come out as a Supreme Black Card guest, which was obviously an identity far more prestigious than Black Gold. After getting into the car, Jack casually handed the driver a small square box. "This is for you." The ghost driver opened it with a puzzled look on his face, only to discover an extremely expensive watch inside, another Patek Philippe. It was one of the ghost world's most famous top luxury brands, where even the cheapest piece cost at least $20,000. It was something he had never once dared to dream of owning in his entire life. And in an instant, his eyes turned red with emotion. For decades, he had lived at the absolute bottom of the paranormal world, spending every day forcing smiles on the streets of Brooklyn just to scrape by, never once knowing what it felt like to be truly respected. Not long after, the ghost taxi arrived at the Metropolitan Museum on the west side of the city. Jack lifted his eyes and surveyed the surroundings, only to find the entire museum shrouded in a layer of pale white fog, with a sprawling city cemetery stretching out directly behind it. After only a few steps, Jack spotted several humans already gathered outside the main gate in the distance, and judging by the situation, they were clearly here for the survival mission too. Among them, Jack recognized the pot-bellied bald man at a glance. It was David, a well-known wealthy businessman from Beverly Hills. He was a man who showed up in the Wall Street Journal often enough, and tucked in his arms was a young woman who was most likely the blonde sugar baby he kept around. Besides them, there were also two young men who obviously looked like a pair of street thugs who hung around together. The moment they saw Jack approach, one of them called out first, "Hey man, did you get dragged into this paranormal mission too?" But Jack couldn't even be bothered to answer, because in paranormal missions, there was no such thing as a real friend. Meanwhile, the blonde sugar baby stared at Jack with a face full of fear. "I just saw him get out of a cab. But that driver, he wasn't human at all." The moment she said that, the others were all startled. "Wait, don't tell me this guy's one of them." Jack only frowned slightly. "Stop staring at me. If I really were a paranormal creature, do you think it'd still be standing here alive? Instead of wasting time guessing who I am, you'd be better off thinking about how you're going to survive the mission that's coming next." The green-haired thug with a lip piercing immediately curled his lip and muttered to the yellow-haired guy wearing his cap backward, "We're already in a paranormal survival challenge, and this guy is still trying to act tough." The yellow-haired thug scoffed openly. "Seriously, we tried to bring him in and he still acts all high and mighty. Out here without street brothers watching his back? Let's see how he plans to survive this death game." Even the wealthy businessman David was a little annoyed, though he still comforted the blonde sweetheart in his arms. "He's just some clueless punk. A young guy like that has neither power nor resources. Just stay close to me. What I have at my disposal is way beyond anything that kind of brat can compare to." The sugar baby thought about how David had relied on his connections and status, paying a hefty price to obtain those incredibly precious nether dollars, and her heart immediately felt much more at ease. Looking at it that way, all the effort she had put in that morning in the presidential suite to please David had not been wasted after all. Just then, a sheet of parchment suddenly appeared in Jack's hand, and on it were the words, "Mission, Mist, Metropolis Museum." The Vampire Duke had once been an exceptionally accomplished commander-rank general, and after growing old and leaving the battlefield behind, he retired here with his family and servants. As his friends, you have come especially to pay him a visit. And the Duke has already prepared a French dinner for you, while the old British butler is waiting for you at the entrance. Please step forward and knock on the door at once. One more thing. The Duke dislikes guests who arrive late, so make sure to get moving as quickly as possible. And while Jack was still reading the parchment, The green-haired thug had already stepped forward and knocked on the museum's door, but the yellow-haired thug, who had been calling him his bro all this time, quietly took a step back and hid behind him. The one who opened the door was an old butler dressed in a tailcoat. "Ah, more new guests. Please come in." His tone sounded polite enough, but there was not the slightest trace of warmth on his face. Ever since this place had become a paranormal scenario, 20 or 30 waves of visitors had already come through, and without exception, every single one of them had arrived empty-handed. In the old butler's eyes, they understood nothing about the manners and respect expected in European aristocratic society. He could not help recalling the days when the Duke had not yet fallen from power. Back then, every guest who came to visit would bring a large number of expensive gifts. Even he himself would benefit from it, and received tips worth several hundred nether dollars. After the first 4 players entered through the gate one by one, the old butler was just about to close the door, when he suddenly realized that one person still had not come in. "Why are you still standing there? If you don't come in now, I'm closing the door, and once that happens, don't even dream of getting in again." And failing to enter meant there was no way to complete the mission, only to remain outside and wait for death. Jack immediately stepped forward with an easy smile and walked through the gate. "Please don't be upset, Mr. Butler. This is my first time troubling you with such an abrupt visit, so I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. This is just a little token of mine. Please consider it my apology." In almost an instant, the old butler's tightly furrowed brows relaxed, and he thought to himself that this young man was not bad at all. At least, he knew proper manners. But the moment the old butler opened the box, he was completely startled. Inside that exquisite and luxurious little case lay an incredibly refined Nether Patek Philippe watch, and it was even one of the high-end limited editions, worth no less than $100,000. A gift on that level was something that even in the Duke's glory days, only the Duke himself would have been fit to receive. So the old butler's first thought was that this young man had to have brought the wrong gift. Unable to hold it back, he quickly asked, "Have you mistaken the recipient? This should be meant for the Duke, shouldn't it? I'm only a butler. How could I possibly deserve something this valuable?" To his surprise, Jack merely smiled. "No. This gift is for you. You've spent most of your life working tirelessly for the Duke's household. I truly admire that. This little gift is only a small token of my respect." Hearing that the present was really meant for him, and after being praised so highly by Jack, the old butler was instantly overwhelmed with emotion. "Mr. Jack, please rest assured, I may only be a butler, but I will take care of everything. But my words still carry some weight in the Duke's household. You can enjoy your visit without worry. I guarantee that you'll leave this mist museum alive." As the old butler led Jack toward the main hall, he took the initiative to explain that before the dinner officially began, there would be a small game to help the guests pass the time. Hearing that, Jack couldn't help muttering to himself inwardly. Since when did the Metropolitan Museum have some kind of side game like this? Could it be that arriving earlier triggered a completely different mission for this time slot? Meanwhile, the other 4 people had already been waiting in the Baroque-style hall for quite a while. The moment they saw the old butler approach, all of their eyes immediately turned toward him. In their minds, this old butler was obviously the elite-tier mini-boss of the mission. But what happened next left every one of them stunned on the spot. The old butler respectfully led Jack to a genuine leather Chesterfield sofa and invited him to sit down. Then, with a smile on his face, he asked, "Mr. Jack, what would you like to drink? We have hand-brewed coffee and Earl Grey tea." A short while later, he personally returned, carrying a silver tray and gently placed a cup of tea beside Jack. When the bone china lid was lifted, steaming hot Earl Grey tea was revealed inside. Only then did the old butler turn to the others and explain, "Dear guests, the French dinner is still being prepared. To help pass the time while you wait, the Duke has specially arranged a little game for you. Its name is Deadly Hide and Seek. The game lasts for 2 hours, and once it begins, zombie guards will appear throughout the museum. They will actively hunt down all outsiders. Under no circumstances must you allow yourselves to be seen by them. If you are unfortunate enough to be discovered, then you must do everything in your power to evade them. However, during the process of hiding, you must not touch any of the antique exhibits in the museum, other than the floors and the walls. Every unmoving object in this place belongs to the Duke's precious collection. Anyone who dares to move or touch them will suffer the Duke's cruelest punishment. Finally, during the game, none of you are allowed to leave the first floor. The moment you step beyond that boundary, death will fall upon you at once." The instant those words came down, the atmosphere in the entire hall turned eerie. Other than the floors and walls, everything else that stayed still was apparently considered part of the exhibition, which meant that once the hiding began, they wouldn't even be allowed to touch display cases or sofas. How was anyone supposed to play a game like that? The blonde sugar baby clung tightly to David, clearly placing all her hopes of survival on him. But the problem was that David himself was already in no position to save anyone. He had to admit that what was happening now was more intense and nerve-wracking than any Wall Street battle he had ever faced, because this time, the stake was his own life. Jack quickly analyzed the situation. Since the rules clearly stated that the exhibits could not be touched, that meant if they ran into zombie guards, they would not even be able to grab a nearby bronze artifact to fight back. In other words, they could only hide passively, while also making sure not to touch any of the tables, chairs, or furnishings around them. Under restrictions this harsh, surviving in hiding for a full 2 hours was almost impossible. If they could not find the true path to survival hidden within those brutal rules, then death was the only ending waiting for them. Just then, the antique clock suddenly let out a deep and heavy chime. In the next instant, mist flooded the hall and swallowed the entire space, and the game officially began. The bizarre scene unfolding before them immediately made the sugar baby scream. David instantly lowered his voice and snapped viciously. "Why are you screaming that loud? Are you trying to bring the guards straight to us? If you want to die, don't drag me down with you." The moment he finished speaking, he violently threw the woman in his arms onto the cold marble floor. At the same time, the yellow-haired thug and the green-haired thug had already started scrambling for places to hide. Based on the dark figures flickering through the fog, Jack quickly concluded that there had to be at least 2 zombie guards. Sure enough, the first zombie guard soon appeared behind David. The sharp stench of rotting flesh instantly made his scalp go numb and told him danger was already right behind him. He whipped around and saw the guard charging at him with its bloody jaws wide open. David almost didn't think at all before grabbing the sugar baby and shoving her straight toward the guard. Then he turned and ran without looking back even once. The sugar baby could not believe David could be this heartless. A wave of overwhelming terror sent her adrenaline surging through her body. She scrambled up from the ground in a panic and ran desperately in another direction. Fortunately for her, the zombie guard ended up turning and chasing the rich businessman David instead. Only then did she barely gain a moment to catch her breath. On the side, the yellow-haired and green-haired thugs were in no better shape. A tall zombie guard had already completely blocked off their path. Putting on a serious face, the yellow-haired thug looked at his so-called brother and said, "Bro, hold him off. I'll circle around from behind and hit him with a sneak attack." The green-haired thug immediately nodded. After all, they had grown up together on the streets since they were kids. So even though he was terrified inside, he still gritted his teeth and stayed where he was, trying to draw the guard's attention. But as the guard came closer and closer, the green-haired thug's legs began trembling uncontrollably. He stared desperately past the guard, waiting for his brother to appear and land a fatal strike from behind. But after several seconds passed, he had already been forced into a dead corner, and the yellow-haired thug still never showed up. Seeing that, the guard suddenly burst into laughter. "Are you waiting for that yellow-haired guy with the backward cap? He already ran off behind me. He never planned to attack me at all. He just wanted you to die as bait, so he could buy himself time to escape." The green-haired thug refused to believe that he had really been betrayed by a street brother of 10 years. But before he could fully face reality, the zombie guard had already torn him in half on the spot. Hearing the miserable scream from behind him, the yellow-haired thug slowly revealed a mocking smile. "At a time like this, you still believe in brothers? Brothers are the very people you're supposed to sell out." At that moment, Jack stood in front of a suit of medieval knight armor, frowning as he fought hard. Exhibition pieces were objects that could not be moved, and no one was allowed to touch them. One clue after another came together in his mind like scattered pearls strung into a single chain. In the very next second, realization hit him. The rule had stated it clearly. No matter who it was, anyone who moved or touched an exhibit would be punished by the Duke. At first glance, that rule seemed like it existed purely to restrain the humans. But in truth, the ones bound by it were not just humans. The zombie guards were included too, which meant that in this deadly game of hide-and-seek, humans were not actually doomed from the start. As long as he could turn himself into an exhibit, he could place himself in an unbeatable position. And the rules had also made it clear that every object that did not move counted as an exhibit. So, if he ever ran into a zombie guard, the correct move was not to run at all, but to stand perfectly still. The so-called instruction that players should do everything they could to avoid the guards was nothing more than a trap meant to lure them into making the wrong move. If someone trusted only the surface meaning of the rules, they would most likely miss the true path to survival. Sure enough, when the zombie guard lunged at Jack, it suddenly stopped dead when it was only about a meter away from him. Then it simply stood there and stared at him, not daring to step any closer. After a brief standoff, the zombie guard finally had no choice but to turn around and leave. But just as Jack let out a breath of relief, a hand suddenly landed on his back. The hand was pale and ice cold, and at a glance, it was obvious that it did not belong to any human. Jack's expression changed instantly. How was that possible? By his reasoning, he had already become the equivalent of an exhibit, and no paranormal being should have been able to touch him. Had his deduction been wrong? Just as Jack was still trying to make sense of it, a strange yet respectful voice suddenly spoke behind him. "Sir, your tea." As the words fell, a waiter in a vest stepped forward with a silver tray in his hands. "The old butler was worried you might be thirsty, so he specifically sent me to bring you a cup of hot tea. The museum is cold and damp, Mr. Jack. Please take care to keep yourself warm. Those zombie guards are unable to harm you. And if you no longer wish to participate in the game, you may go to the VIP lounge and rest at any time." Only then did Jack finally let out a long breath. So this was one of the Duke's personal attendants. Still, he understood one thing very clearly. If he stopped using his brain for too long, his hard-earned survival instincts would quickly begin to dull. And if he later ran into a far more dangerous paranormal scenario with even harsher and more complicated rules, the odds were that he would be in real trouble. So as long as there was still a chance to sharpen himself and gain more experience, he had to seize every opportunity to grow stronger. At that moment, the blonde sugar baby, who had been with the wealthy businessman David, also came stumbling over to this side. Ever since she got separated from David, she had been hiding and running through the Mist Metropolis Museum all by herself, with her arms bruised black and blue from all the knocks. She looked utterly miserable. She had originally planned to go up and beg Jack for help. But to her surprise, Jack was currently boxed in by two paranormal beings, one in front and one behind. There was a zombie guard in front of him, and a vest-wearing attendant behind him. She had thought Jack was done for this time, only to realize in shock the very next second that the zombie guard seemed deeply wary of Jack, and the attendant was even more ridiculous, respectfully handing Jack a steaming cup of Earl Grey tea. In an instant, Jack's image in her mind changed from some random street punk into an unfathomable big shot. She immediately brushed back her hair and made up her mind on the spot. Since David couldn't be relied on, she would just switch to someone stronger. Because if she could cling to Jack, then life in this paranormal apocalypse would still be full of comfort and luxury, wouldn't it? Thinking that, she began swaying her hips as she walked toward him, then said in a sugary voice, "Hey handsome, I see you came here alone. Doesn't it get lonely by yourself?" But Jack had absolutely no interest in this kind of heavy makeup, plastic doll style. And more importantly, this sugar baby didn't exactly look clean to him, so he had no intention of catching some nasty disease. At the same time, the yellow-haired thug also sneaked his way over while hiding the whole time. But the moment he saw Jack, his whole mindset instantly blew up. Because Jack was casually holding a steaming cup of English tea, looking completely unruffled from head to toe, and with a hot blonde practically throwing herself at him on top of that. The yellow-haired thug simply couldn't understand it. He had only survived by selling out the brother he had grown up with. So why was Jack the one living this comfortably? So he immediately changed his attitude and shamelessly walked over to Jack with a fawning grin. "Boss, you look seriously capable. How about taking me with you? I'm the most loyal guy in my whole neighborhood. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it." But Jack had already seen before the mission even started that this yellow-haired thug was no good at all. After all, 5 years of surviving the apocalypse in his previous life had given him more than enough ability to read people. And now that the green-haired thug, who had been sticking with yellow hair, was nowhere to be seen, Jack could more or less guess what had happened. So he gave a half smile and said, "Then if I told you to die right now, would you do it?" That single sentence instantly left the yellow-haired thug speechless. And just at that moment, the sugar baby had also been coldly rejected by Jack. When yellow hair caught sight of her seductive body, his heart immediately started itching again. He instantly turned around and invited the sugar baby to team up with him instead. At this point, the sugar baby was completely alone. David had already thrown her away, and Jack couldn't care less about her. So with no other choice, she could only grit her teeth and agree to join yellow hair. As time slowly passed, the zombie guard's search seemed to become less and less strict. After half an hour, their figures had completely disappeared, leaving the entire museum unnervingly quiet. Seeing that, Both Yellow Hair and the Sugar Baby secretly let out a sigh of relief. In their eyes, the hardest part of the mission had clearly already passed. But right then, crooked dots started surfacing in Yellow Hair's mind. He had been eyeing this blonde sweetheart for a long time already, and now that they were hiding together alone after going through a life and death scare, the filthy desire inside him was suddenly impossible to suppress. And in order to keep receiving Yellow Hair's protection in the mission ahead, the Sugar Baby was more than willing to play along. Before long, the noise the two of them were making had spread through the entire Metropolitan Museum. Even Jack couldn't help feeling a little stunned. Seriously, fooling around like this in a paranormal survival challenge? Were they really that eager to die faster? Based on the experience Jack had built up in his previous life, this round of hide and seek was clearly a classic guard pressure maxing scenario. This meant that at the start of the mission, the system would use a large number of zombie guards to apply overwhelming pressure and push the difficulty straight to the limit. This phase would usually last around 10 minutes, and only after that would the overall difficulty begin to ease. But once the mission entered its final 10 minutes, after everyone had let their guard down, the danger would spike sharply again, sometimes becoming even worse than it had been at the beginning. And in the end, many players lost their lives precisely because they failed to notice that shift in time. At that moment, the wealthy businessman David was hiding alone in a corner. Instead of relaxing after more than an hour of calm, he had actually become even more alert. After all, having spent decades fighting through Wall Street's brutal business world, he was far more cautious than the average person. Then suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a black figure. His voice instantly warped with fear. A zombie guard. And with that, he scrambled up and bolted for another spot. But Yellow Hair and the Sugar Baby weren't nearly as lucky. At that moment, she was still curled up against him, whispering sweet nothings into his ear, and trying to get him to look after her more in the mission ahead. But in the very next second, Yellow Hair suddenly let out a sharp scream. When he whipped his head around, he found the tall zombie guard standing right behind him. He instantly tried to jump up and run, only to realize in horror that he had relaxed too much just moments ago and hadn't even managed to pull his jeans back on properly. And at a time like this, even losing a few seconds, no, even a single second, was enough to get someone killed. So he gritted his teeth and violently shoved the Sugar Baby straight toward the zombie guard. And the woman never could have imagined that within less than 2 hours, she would be betrayed without hesitation by two different men. In the next instant, blood sprayed everywhere. And as the antique clock rang out once again with its heavy chime, the game finally came to an end. After the thin mist in the hall gradually dispersed, David and Yellow Hair returned to the hall looking exhausted and completely disheveled. And when they saw Jack leisurely sipping black tea and eating English tea pastries, a deeper sense of wariness immediately rose in their hearts. Just then, the old butler walked over at an unhurried pace. "Dear guests, His Grace the Duke has already prepared a lavish French dinner for you on the second floor. As long as you finish the dinner, you will be free to leave this place. Please follow me." After the group arrived at the luxurious dining hall on the second floor, the old butler continued his explanation. "However, before the dinner begins, there are still a few rules that you must keep firmly in mind. First, you must show absolute courtesy to the Vampire Duke and the Duchess. Under no circumstances are you to commit any act that insults nobility. Second, any food personally given to you by the Duke must not be refused. You are required to finish every bite. If you fail to do so, what awaits you will be an extremely cruel punishment." Another paranormal mission again. It seemed this Mist Metropolis Museum was far more dangerous than it looked on the surface. Soon after, under the old butler's arrangement, everyone took their seats, one by one. Jack's seat was placed at the very top of the long table, right beside the Duke's main seat. It was obvious that the old butler had arranged this on purpose so Jack would have the chance to speak directly with the Duke. As for David and Yellow Hair, they were seated much farther away, out on the edge, clearly the kind of spots reserved for low-tier guests. A moment later, the Duke and the Duchess finally appeared. "You have all come from afar, and I have specially prepared this dinner for you." As soon as he finished speaking, several attendants walked in carrying platters covered with silver lids. But the moment those plates were set on the table, Jack immediately caught a thick, overpowering smell of blood. So the food at tonight's dinner was definitely not going to be normal. Yellow Hair nearly threw up on the spot. "What the hell is this disgusting crap? Is this supposed to be food for hellhounds or something?" The Duke merely smiled. "In that case, I shall personally assign each of you your meal." But before he could finish, Jack cut in and interrupted him. "Your Grace, please wait a moment. Before the dinner begins, I prepared a few small gifts as a token of respect. They're nothing too extravagant, so I hope neither you nor her grace will mind." As he spoke, Jack took out the gift boxes he had prepared earlier from his spatial ring. At first, the Duke opened the box with a casual, indifferent air. After all, he had held a high position for many years and had seen more than enough in his lifetime. Since Jack himself had said the gift was not especially valuable, the Duke naturally did not expect much. But the instant the box was opened, the Duke's expression changed dramatically. Inside was a distinguished, limited edition Nether Patek Philippe, a top-tier luxury item worth a full 1 million Nether dollars. Even at the height of his glory, the gifts the Duke had received from visitors were usually only in the 700,000 or 800,000 range at most. And sitting beside him, the Duchess looked even more shocked. As the Duchess, the gifts she usually received had always been a step below the Duke's, often no more than a token worth a few tens of thousands. She never would have imagined that the gift Jack prepared for her would be a deep abyss blood diamond necklace worth 1 million Nether dollars. In an instant, the atmosphere at the entire dinner table changed. Smiling warmly, the Duke turned to his wife. "Come now, my dear. Why don't you be the one to assign Jack his meal?" It was obvious that the Duke was deliberately cutting Jack some slack. The rules only said that guests had to finish the food assigned by the Duke. They never said anything about having to finish food assigned by the Duchess. But to Jack's surprise, the Duchess merely clapped her hands lightly and directly ordered the attendants to bring over several portions of French mousse cake. This sudden reversal left David completely dumbfounded. But in the very next second, a thought flashed through his mind, and he suddenly remembered the $10 bill he had pulled countless strings to obtain, the one he still hadn't used. After all, in the paranormal apocalypse, the most valuable thing of all was Nether cash. As long as you had money in hand, even paranormal beings would scramble to flatter you. He had burned through nearly every connection he had built over more than a decade in Beverly Hills just to get that $10 bill, and now, in his eyes, this was exactly the moment to use it. As far as he was concerned, whatever random junk Jack had brought out couldn't possibly be more valuable than his precious green bill. The moment he presented it, the Duke and Duchess would surely be overjoyed. With that thought in mind, David stood up on the spot. "Your Grace, I also have an even more precious gift for the two of you." As he spoke, he carefully took out a crumpled bill and placed it in front of the Duke. The Duke lowered his head for a look, only to discover that it was merely a $10 bill, and his mood exploded on the spot. Was this man deliberately trying to humiliate him? He might have fallen on hard times, but no matter what, he was still a European noble among paranormal beings. No matter how far he had declined, it wasn't as if his household couldn't even come up with a few $100,000 in cash. So what exactly was the meaning of bringing him a mere $10? The Duke shot to his feet at once, furious. "You dare insult me at my own dinner? Drag him out and behead him." The zombie attendants moved the moment they heard the order and lunged straight at David without a second word. After David was dragged away by force, the dinner resumed as if nothing had happened. The Duke casually assigned a heap of rotten flesh and stinking eyeballs to Yellowhair, looking at the revolting pile of food on his plate, and then at the delicate French desserts set in front of Jack. The jealousy in Yellowhair's eyes nearly overflowed, and he viciously swore to himself that once they got out of this paranormal mission, he would make sure Jack died. Once Jack was dead, all those valuables on him, along with that spatial ring, would become his. And when the next paranormal survival game came around, he would be able to live as freely and comfortably as Jack did. But the murderous malice in Yellowhair's eyes had already been seen clearly by Jack. So without drawing attention, Jack pulled out the BlackBerry phone beneath the table and quietly called the ghost driver, telling him to wait outside for Yellowhair. After all, to the ghost driver, killing a street thug would be effortless. At the dinner table, Jack chatted and laughed with the Duke and Duchess, while casually revealing bit by bit the immense financial power backing him from Wall Street. The Duke had clearly developed a strong interest in the enormous amount of Nether cash Jack possessed. In his current state, he was badly reduced, and every person in his household, the butler, the attendants, the retainers, needed money to be kept fed and maintained. If he wanted to preserve the respectable upper-class life befitting a noble, then he urgently needed a large amount of money to fill the gaping hole before him. Before long, the Duke had already begun secretly calculating how he might get money out of Jack. Because ordinary things clearly no longer had any chance of catching this young man's eye. Suddenly, the Duke thought of the Reaper heavy tactical body armor in his collection. He silently began hoping that Jack would take an interest in it. An hour later, Yellowhair forced himself to swallow the last eyeball while fighting back his nausea, and the dinner finally came to an end. The old butler then stepped forward and said, "Thank you for visiting the Metropolitan Museum tonight, dear guests. If you have no further business here, you may leave now." Only then did Yellowhair finally let out a long breath of relief. But the next second, he shot Jack a vicious look and began plotting to get out first. He would hide in a bush outside, and the moment Jack came out, pull out his gun and put him down on the spot. The Duke had clearly noticed the hostility in Yellowhair's eyes, so he turned to Jack and remarked, "Mr. Jack, that fellow in the backward cap doesn't seem very friendly toward you." Jack merely nodded. "That's right. He's even planning to kill me once we get outside." "Did your grace not notice that one of the solid silver carving knives from the table has already been slipped away by him?" The moment those words were spoken, a flash of surprise crossed the Duke's face. He had been so focused on discussing investment with Jack that he had not noticed when Yellowhair had pocketed one of the knives. What shocked him even more was that this human, while chatting with him so casually, had still managed to catch a thug's tiny little move. The Duke immediately said, "If you're concerned, Mr. Jack, I can have the guards take care of him for you." But Jack only smiled and declined. "Thank you for the offer, Your Grace, but that won't be necessary. My private driver is already waiting for him outside." Hearing that, the Duke's opinion of Jack rose even higher. It seemed his guess had been right all along. This human clearly had major financial backing, and his own methods were anything but ordinary. So the Duke asked at once, "Mr. Jack, I happen to have a top-tier piece in my private collection. I wonder whether it might interest you?" The moment he heard that, Jack felt a surge of delight. It seemed the Duke had finally run out of patience. Meanwhile, on the other side, Yellowhair had already left the museum. But even after waiting outside for quite a while, he still never saw Jack come out. As the night grew darker, the fog around him thickened more and more, and the damp air turned sharp with cold. Worse still, after forcing down so much rotten flesh, his stomach had already started twisting in violent pain. Yellowhair thought to himself that if he kept waiting like this, he might die from the pain before Jack even came out. It would be better to get to the ER first and come back to deal with Jack afterward. He had just reached for his phone to call 911 for an ambulance, only to realize the moment he looked at the screen that there was no signal at all. Then, to his delight, he suddenly spotted a yellow Crown Victoria taxi parked at the entrance of the wooded road. He didn't waste even a second before sprinting toward it. He yanked open the door and dropped into the seat. "Driver, take me to the nearest hospital. Step on it, now." In the back seat, Yellowhair clutched his stomach tightly with one hand while gasping for breath. All of a sudden, Yellowhair caught a sharp, metallic smell of blood in the air. Panic hit him instantly. Don't tell me he'd run into another paranormal creature again? He stammered as he asked, "Driver, is there something wrong with your cab?" But the driver didn't answer a single word. He only kept pressing harder on the gas, and the car sped up even more. Before long, the taxi came to a stop in a remote, sinister corner of the Black Forest. The driver slowly turned his head, his voice low and hoarse. "Sir, you've arrived at your destination." Yellowhair stared out at the pitch-black woods all around him, his face going paper white. "I told you to take me to the city hospital." The driver's voice remained ice cold. "The hospital was the destination you chose for yourself, but this forest is the grave my boss chose for you. My boss also told me to let you die with some understanding. His name is Jack. So if you want to blame someone, blame yourself for messing with the wrong man. In your next life, keep your eyes open." In the very next second, A miserable scream echoed through the dark forest outside New York. Meanwhile, back inside the Metropolitan Museum, Jack had already followed the Duke into his private office. The whole way there, the Duke had been silently calculating how much he ought to ask for the item. After all, a commander rank relic this rare was something he genuinely hated to part with. If he weren't bankrupt and desperate for cash, he would never have considered selling it. The moment Jack stepped into the office, the first thing that caught his eye was the massive walnut wine cabinet on the right. Except all the Bordeaux bottles that should have filled it were long gone. After sitting down, and before the Duke could even speak, Jack smiled and beat him to it. "Your Grace, there's no rush to talk business yet. Besides the little gifts I brought earlier, I also prepared a few extra surprises for you." As he spoke, Jack casually touched his spatial ring. In the next instant, bottle after bottle of top-tier vintage wine appeared in neat rows across the cabinet, filling the once empty shelves in a blink. The Duke was stunned speechless. Every one of those fine wines was worth a fortune, and the most expensive bottles went for well over $1 million each. Even back in his glory days, when his wealth had been at its peak, he had never lived this extravagantly. And when he thought about how he was now ruined and bankrupt, not a single one of the vampire subordinates who had once basked in his glory had even come to visit him. Jack's gesture felt to the Duke like help arriving in the middle of a snowstorm. In that moment, he completely gave up the idea of holding back or continuing to probe cautiously. The Duke reached out and pushed the wine cabinet aside. Hidden behind it was a secret compartment made of high-tech titanium alloy. In the next second, the Duke pulled out a massive heavy defense suit of armor, taller than a man. "Mr. Jack, to be honest with you, this is the war treasure I've treasured for most of my life. A commander rank item, the Reaper Heavy Tactical Armor. It possesses the power to stand against the rules of the Abyss." There was a note of relief and sincerity in the Duke's voice. "Mr. Jack, you've shown me such generosity that I have little I can offer in return. Please accept this heavy armor as my gift to you." Even Jack was momentarily stunned. This Duke was being far more generous than he had expected. After all, on the current black market, this armor would sell for at least $20 million. And as the paranormal apocalypse continued to deepen, people would only become more and more aware of just how terrifying the power of rules truly was. And the value of the Reaper Heavy Tactical Armor would only keep rising as the paranormal apocalypse went deeper. At its peak, someone on the dark web had even offered a staggering $1 billion for it. Yet despite being a strategic-grade piece of equipment this valuable, the Duke had simply handed it over to Jack. And the instant Jack put the armor on, it automatically fused with his body. A vast and overwhelming force surged into him at once, and his strength leaped from civilian rank all the way up to enforcer rank. Since the Duke had been this generous, Jack naturally couldn't accept it without showing anything in return, so he immediately took out $10 million in cash. "This heavy armor is far too valuable. I can't just take it for free. Consider this $10 million the price I'm paying for it." The Duke couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Jack really was a Wall Street tycoon worth building a real friendship with. That $10 million would perfectly patch the funding hole in his family trust. Deeply grateful, he solemnly took out a family crest, forged from pure gold. "Brother Jack, this family crest is for you. No matter what trouble you run into in the future, as long as you crush this crest, I'll come help you immediately." After that, Jack naturally shifted the conversation toward his plans for future investments. He explained that he intended to acquire a number of promising assets during the paranormal apocalypse, but still hadn't fully decided which sectors he should move into first. In his view, the Duke, as a member of Europe's old money aristocracy, clearly had broader vision and sharper judgment than he did. After thinking for a moment, the Duke said, "I believe private preparatory schools are one paranormal asset truly worth acquiring. Those powerful paranormal politicians and wealthy elites almost all have children of their own, and top-tier elite prep schools are an extremely scarce resource for higher-level paranormal beings. In order to ensure their descendants can smoothly enter Ivy League universities, they're willing to pay astonishing prices. If you can buy a top private school and become the one controlling it from behind the scenes, then those high-level paranormal offspring who want recommendation letters will be completely in your hands, won't they?" The Duke's words hit Jack like a revelation. And the same logic clearly applied not just to private high schools, but to private hospitals as well. Right now, no matter how much capital he held, he was still essentially the one asking paranormal beings to do things for him. But once he controlled true core resources, the entire dynamic would flip, and paranormal beings would be the ones coming to him. At that moment, Jack suddenly thought of the elite private high school he was currently attending. According to the memories from his previous life, about 1 month into the paranormal apocalypse, that school would transform into the paranormal scenario known as Nightfall Preparatory Academy. After that, it would expand at a shocking pace, and in less than half a year, grow into one of the most powerful educational conglomerates in the region. And if Jack remembered correctly, his school should transform into Nightfall Preparatory Academy exactly 2 days later, which meant he could conveniently take part in that survival mission as well. Before leaving, Jack made use of the privileges that came with his Supreme Black card and opened an Amex Centurion supplementary card with a $1 million limit. Then he gave it to the Duchess as a farewell gift. After leaving the Metropolitan Museum, Jack told the ghost taxi driver to head for the Midnight Diner first, since he planned to go check on things in person. But the moment he stepped into the diner, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, this should have been the peak midnight rush, when business was at its best. Yet when he looked around, there were only a handful of scattered customers sitting in the booths. It didn't take long for Jack to understand why. Standing right in the middle of the bar was a vicious-looking wraith in a mafia suit, while the restaurant staff stood gathered around him with tense expressions. Jack only needed a single glance to tell that this gangster ghost was no ordinary thug, and was at least elite rank. Lilith was staring at the ghost with a troubled look on her face, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. And the moment she saw Jack return, she hurried over to report what had happened. Ever since Jack had fully bought out the Midnight Diner, not only had he refused to lay off any staff, he had even paid all the back wages the union had been withholding, and that had sent everyone's morale through the roof. The waiters had been serving every customer so well that guests felt completely at home, while the cleaners worked so hard that the entire Midnight Diner had become filled with an almost refreshing scent of blood. One Mexican female chef had even combined Texas barbecue with awful cooking, creating what had quickly become the diner's hottest signature dish, infernal flame-roasted blood liver. And for a while, the Midnight Diner's business exploded, with its revenue hitting $500,000 in just a single day. But once business got too good, it was only natural that it would attract the jealousy of competitors on the same street. The elite rank ghost standing before them was a mob boss named Butcher Tony, the gangster owner behind the top-tier Intercontinental Hotel across the street. And because of how hard the Midnight Diner had been booming, even the room service business at Tony's hotel was on the verge of collapsing. So Tony had come swaggering over on the strength of his family's power, clearly intending to smash the place up and ruin the Midnight Diner's business for good. Just then, Tony strode forward with a cigar clenched between his teeth and growled at Jack. "So you're the new owner of the Midnight Diner? A mere human actually thinks he can run paranormal business on my turf? Take my advice, and don't be stupid. Transfer the property rights of the Midnight Diner to me right now. I'll give you $1 million. Trying to force a takeover with only $1 million nether dollars was nothing short of open robbery. So Jack immediately replied coldly, "I'll count to 3. Take your suited thugs and get out of here now, and I might let this slide." But instead of getting angry, Tony threw his head back and burst into loud laughter. "A human whose only enforcer rank thinks he can talk to me like this? Crushing you would be easier than crushing a bug." As soon as he finished speaking, he moved to pull out his gun and make his move on Jack. Seeing that, Lilith immediately rushed forward and planted herself in front of Jack to shield him, while the surrounding employees all grabbed meat grinders and baseball bats, clearly ready to fight Tony's mob to the bitter end. Because if not for Jack, they would have long since become forgotten stray ghosts on the street. But Jack simply raised a hand and gently pushed Lilith aside. Then, with a heavy thud, Tony's full-force punch slammed straight into Jack's body, and yet Jack remained standing exactly where he was without moving an inch. While Tony himself was sent staggering backward several steps by the terrifying recoil, the Reaper heavy tactical armor truly lived up to its name. The employees around them were all stunned. None of them had expected their boss to tank a full-force punch from an elite rank mob boss without budging. Tony immediately realized something was wrong. This human was clearly only giving off enforcer rank mana fluctuations. He instantly roared, "Who the hell are you? What family do you belong to?" Jack's gaze turned icy. "I'll say this one last time. When I count to 3, you get out of here." Tony kept sizing Jack up from head to toe. clearly unwilling to leave in humiliation just like that. But Jack's very next move scared the soul out of him. Jack calmly pulled out that pure gold family crest from his spatial ring. Tony recognized it at a single glance. That was the token of a commander rank powerhouse, and not just any commander rank figure, but a super vampire lord capable of ruling the entire state of New York. Everyone knew that a commander rank lord would usually only ever issue one such crest in a lifetime. It was basically a public declaration that the terrifying existence behind it shared life and death ties with Jack. With a thud, Tony dropped straight to his knees on the floor. "Boss Jack, I'll get out. I'm leaving right now." But after crawling out of the restaurant, the more Tony thought about it, the more terrified he became. He knew very well that if the commander rank lord behind Jack ever learned what had happened tonight, someone would definitely be sent to hunt him down. As a gangster ghost himself, he understood better than anyone how cruel, powerful upper-level beings could be when tormenting street-level trash like him. Rather than spend the rest of his life hiding in fear and waiting for the day he got caught, he decided he might as well end it cleanly. So he yanked out his revolver and blew his own brains out with a single shot. The diners inside were utterly shocked when they heard what happened. A mere human had actually scared a mob boss into killing himself. News of it spread through the paranormal underworld at lightning speed. From that day on, not a single gang dared come to the Midnight Diner demanding protection money ever again. As for the luxury Intercontinental Hotel under Tony's control, Jack soon took it over through black market channels and folded it into his business as a new branch. After that, Jack gathered all the employees together. Then, he handed out the gift shopping cards he had purchased from Fallen Mall one by one. He told them that each card already had 5,000 nether dollars loaded onto it, and from now on, another 1,000 would be added every month as employee benefits. He also promised that as long as they worked hard and did their jobs properly, their paid leave and medical coverage would only keep getting better in the future. The moment those words were spoken, the entire room fell silent. Because in a paranormal world ruled by capital and strength, weaker ghost employees had always been at the mercy of ruthless bosses who squeezed every last drop out of them. Just getting paid minimum wage on time was already something they would have considered a blessing. Benefits like shopping cards were the kind of Wall Street executive treatment they wouldn't even dare dream about. Early the next morning, Jack drove his sports car back to the private high school. It was the middle of the morning AP class period, and the sound of teachers lecturing drifted out from the classrooms. Looking at the scene before him, Jack couldn't help sighing inwardly. This was probably the final stretch of peace American campus life would ever have. Because tonight, the Nightfall Preparatory Academy instance would officially open, and the entire campus would turn into a living hell. When that happened, every single student in the school would be dragged into a paranormal battle royale. As the 8 o'clock morning bell rang, a faint smell of blood began spreading through the air, and the Nightfall Preparatory Academy instance officially began. At the exact same time, every student received a blood-red email on their iPad. Paranormal mission, deadly SAT exam. Only top students who pass the test will earn the right to stay alive and receive an Ivy League offer. The exam will officially begin at 9 a.m. All students are required to arrive at the main auditorium testing hall on time. Not long after that, a cold-faced female dean in formal business attire walked into the exam hall. "I am the chief proctor for this SAT exam. All students are required to obey the following rules. First, no one is allowed to look at another student's answer sheet. Second, if anyone posts the contents of the exam on Twitter or Facebook and leaks it, they will be executed immediately. Third, during the exam, no one is allowed to leave the testing hall, and no one may use any weapon to harm a proctor." The moment those rules were announced, a few sharp-minded top students immediately noticed what seemed like a loophole. The rules never explicitly said cheating was forbidden, which meant whispering, using an Apple Watch, or even leaving one's seat seemed to be technically allowed. But there was no way a paranormal death game mission would leave behind a loophole that obvious, unless cheating was fundamentally impossible in the first place. Quite a few Ivy Track prep students could already sense that this deadly SAT exam was hiding something lethal beneath the surface. And when the papers were finally handed out, everyone in the room was completely stunned, because each student received not only an exam paper, but also a standard US military tactical dagger. Deadly exam paper. Jack of grade 12, class A, welcome to the deadly exam. A shape-shifting paranormal creature disguised as a human has infiltrated your class and is currently hiding inside the testing hall. You must identify and kill it within 2 hours. Failure to do so will be treated as failing the exam. Once the exam ends, half of the surviving students in the class will then die at random. Before the exam begins, please make sure to carefully read the following rules. Rule 1. The creature will not attack unless it has first been physically harmed. But once it is injured, it will immediately begin indiscriminate slaughter. Rule 2. During the exam, all students' magical fluctuations will be suppressed by the testing hall. If the creature attacks you, no one will be able to kill it through brute force. Rule 3. Only by stabbing the creature with the tactical dagger can you inflict fatal damage on it. Rule 4. This rule applies only to you personally. 1 hour and 30 minutes after the exam begins, you must shout, "Oh my god." After that, no matter who asks you why, you are not allowed to answer. Rule 5. Once you believe you have found the answer, you may initiate a class-wide democratic vote on whether to submit the paper. If a majority votes yes, the paper may be submitted to the proctor, who will determine whether the answer is correct. If the answer is wrong, it will be treated as exam failure, and execution will be carried out on the spot. Rule 6. When the number of students remaining in the class drops to half or below, the exam will be automatically considered passed. Attention! The shape-shifting paranormal creature has the following traits. First, the creature is extremely lazy. Before you identify it, it usually will not make any bodily movements at all. Second, the creature will occasionally let out beast-like growls and strange cries. Pay close attention to any unnatural sounds around you, because they may help you track down the creature. Third, just like humans, the creature has 4 limbs. From the outside, it is almost impossible to tell who the disguised copy really is. Fourth, stab its body with your tactical dagger. If the target is the creature, sulfur-like black smoke will pour out from the wound. At that moment, every student in the class had shock and disbelief written all over their face. All at once, everyone started looking around wildly, desperate to figure out which one of them was the monster hiding in plain sight. As for Jack, he stared at the rules on the exam sheet and fell into deep thought. These rules were clearly far more complicated than any street brawl he had dealt with before. Based on the first 3 rules, the creature could not actively harm anyone before it was attacked. But the moment it was discovered and wounded, it would instantly turn into a chainsaw maniac and begin slaughtering people indiscriminately, and no one would be able to stop it. Even with a tactical dagger in hand, there might not be time to fight back, which meant that once the creature was identified, the only option was to kill it fast, clean, and hard in a single strike, without giving it even the slightest chance to retaliate. Then, when Rule 4 was added into the equation, the idea of stabbing someone with the dagger first, and then checking whether black smoke came out to confirm whether they were the monster. This clearly became a deadly trap. If a student suspected that someone was the creature, what would an American high schooler's first instinct be? Simple: stab first. But the problem was that the strike couldn't just hit an arm or a leg, and it definitely couldn't be some shallow cut across the skin, because if the target really was the monster, the second it got hurt, it would enter full slaughter mode. And once that happened, nobody in the testing hall would be able to stop it. In other words, the only workable method was to drive that military dagger straight into its skull or heart. But if the person being suspected turned out to be just an ordinary white classmate, then without question, that would be first-degree murder. And the other hidden killing move buried in the rules was Rule 6. Once the number of students left in the class dropped to half or below, the exam would automatically be counted as passed. So, aside from the creature slaughtering students, the other possibility was that these students, who already came from a culture steeped in bullying and social violence, would start killing each other first. It was obvious that the rules of this deadly SAT exam were, at their core, designed to push this group of teenagers into launching a full-on campus battle royale. Very quickly, the classroom exploded into chaos, with cheerleaders and football players all shouting over one another. Suddenly, a girl with braces screamed, "Look, that bespectacled nerd, he's been sitting in his seat the whole time like a statue. He hasn't moved at all." In an instant, every eye in the class turned toward that Asian boy. Do you remember what the paper said? Before the monster is found, it doesn't move. All at once, the jocks who loved bullying people on a normal day got excited. "It's him. Stab him. Hurry up and stab him." And with that, Brad, the quarterback of the football team, grabbed the tactical dagger and drove it straight toward the Asian boy. But what happened next left everyone in the room completely stunned. What poured out of the nerd's head was not sulfur black smoke at all, but bright red blood. In an instant, the entire classroom fell into dead silence, and only one thought remained in everyone's mind. How could this be? If he wasn't the monster, then why had he been sitting there the whole time like a statue, without moving even once? Several girls instinctively covered their mouths and staggered half a step back. Exactly. Brad walked right up to him with a knife, and he still didn't say a single word. It was only then that one brave straight-A girl tremblingly opened the dead student's exam paper. Rule 4 was written there, in black and white. After the exam begins, you must remain completely motionless for 30 minutes. During this time, no matter what anyone says or does, you must not respond in any way. Otherwise, execution will be immediate. At that moment, everyone finally realized that in this deadly exam, one careless move could either get you erased by the rules or make you personally murder one of your own classmates by mistake. And scenes straight out of a horror movie like this were playing out in other classrooms as well. In less than 20 minutes, quite a few unlucky students had already died for no clear reason at all. The same thing soon happened in Jack's own grade 12 class A. A black student, who had remained seated without moving, immediately drew everyone's attention. Several school bullies were already gripping their daggers, eager to make a move. But Jack simply swept his gaze across the room, his tone calm yet carrying unquestionable authority. "Put the knives down. Don't test him. He's not the monster. He's just being restrained by his personal Rule 4 and can't speak right now." The reason Jack was so certain was because in his previous life, some idiot had done the exact same thing and only realized he had killed the wrong person after driving the dagger in. The others still looked doubtful, but when they thought of Jack's ruthless reputation at school, they ultimately chose to back off obediently. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, the moment the restriction from Rule 4 ended, that black student shot up from his seat and started gasping for air. "Jesus Christ, I'm not the monster. I can finally talk now. Jack, thank God, thank you for saving me." In an instant, the way everyone looked at Jack changed yet again, and this time there was a fresh layer of fear and respect in their eyes. But as the seconds kept ticking by, the sense of restlessness, pressure, and unease began spreading rapidly through the sealed exam hall. In many classrooms, once Pandora's box of killing had been opened, there was no longer any way to shut it again. They had even begun using the method Americans were most proud of, democratic voting, to decide who should die. The moment someone became a suspect, the whole class would immediately raise their hands and vote. As long as more than half voted yes, that person would be legally executed on the spot. But everyone was terrified that the next one erased might be themselves, and everyone wanted to identify that damned monster as quickly as possible. So in almost every single vote, more than 90% of the class would coldly and without hesitation vote in favor. Right then, a boy suddenly rushed forward and shouted, "I'm his roommate. He's never like this normally. He has to be possessed by some evil thing." Someone immediately raised his voice and said, "Then let's vote right now. Everyone in favor of executing him, raise your hand." The instant the words fell, almost the entire class shot their hands into the air and started screaming, "Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" After 3 innocent students had already been executed, one after another, a bespectacled Asian boy finally stood up. He was the class genius who had won a full scholarship. "Everyone, calm down and listen to me. I already know who the monster is." The second he said that, the frenzied classroom fell silent. Every eye in the room turned toward the honor student at once. The monster hiding in this classroom has actually been right in front of all of us the whole time. It's our chief proctor. Instantly, the students all looked at each other in confusion. One football player immediately shouted at him, "Nerd. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Didn't the rules already make everything about the proctor obvious enough?" Someone else quickly backed him up. "Yeah, exactly. Everybody knows that already." But the honor student only gave a mysterious smile. "The truth is often just this simple. You're all overthinking it so much that you forgot the answer is sometimes right in front of your face. The rules only say there's one monster in the testing hall. They never say that monster has to be one of the students, do they?" In an instant, the entire class exploded again. How could a life and death battle royale at this level have an answer this simple? One cheerleader said hesitantly. "But if you really think about it, what he's saying kind of does make sense. The rules never actually say what identity the monster has." Seeing the crowd begin to waver, the honor student pushed up his glasses and continued, "That's exactly what makes the rules so vicious. They put the proctor right in front of us from the beginning, on purpose, just to throw everyone's thinking off and make us instinctively believe the answer couldn't possibly be this simple. If you don't believe me, then look at the monster's third trait. It has 4 arms and legs, just like a human. We all automatically assume that means the monster must be disguised as some high school student. But have any of you stopped to think that this line might actually be pointing at the proctor instead? Because just like us, she also has 4 arms and legs." After a speech delivered with all the force of a presidential campaign rally, the entire class was fired up all over again. No wonder he's an all-A genius. That actually makes so much sense. Quick, we've got the answer now. Start the class vote and turn in the paper already. Under the shadow of this death game exam, The students were already desperate to escape this hellhole as fast as possible. But the proctor only gave them a cold smile. "Are you sure you want to turn it in?" "Yes." Almost every student shouted in perfect unison, like they were under a spell. At the same time, back in Jack's grade 12 Class A, another student suddenly had a flash of inspiration and yelled out, "I've got it. The proctor is the monster we're looking for." After enduring a full hour of psychological pressure, quite a few students had entered that adrenaline-fueled state where their minds were racing faster and faster. But Jack only shook his head calmly. "Your answer is wrong." "Why?" the student demanded, clearly unconvinced. But before Jack could explain, a blood-curdling scream suddenly erupted from the classroom next door. It turned out that only half a minute earlier, the proctor in that room had just collected their papers. Every student there had still been wearing that classic American teen movie look of surviving a disaster by the skin of their teeth. "We only made it because of that genius. We can finally go back home to Beverly Hills alive." Another blonde girl even lifted her chin proudly. "I'd bet our class was the first one to pass and turn in the paper. Isn't that cocky Jack over in Class A next door? Why are they still stuck?" If you ask me, Jack's just all hype. But in the very next second, the proctor's face turned cold as carved ice. "Unfortunately, you idiots got the answer wrong." The entire classroom went dead silent in an instant. Everyone froze. "Wrong? How is that even possible?" The proctor slowly curled her lips into a bloodthirsty smile. "Random execution of half the examinees will now begin. Once that is over, congratulations in advance to those still alive. You may go home." In the next moment, red laser-like cutting lines suddenly appeared across the bodies of half the students. As those red lines stretched longer and longer, blood and organs burst out in great sprays. The students, lucky enough to survive, completely lost their minds and bolted for the door in terror. As they ran, they screamed in total mental collapse. The answer isn't the proctor. The answer isn't the proctor. The boy who had still been acting tough in Class A earlier went pale as a sheet when he saw the carnage in the hallway. If Jack hadn't shut the idea down on the spot, a lot of students in the class really were about to start a vote and turn in their answer. At that moment, one of the cheerleaders finally couldn't help asking in a trembling voice, "Jack, how did you know the proctor wasn't the answer?" Jack's gaze stayed steady, and his tone remained calm. "Simple. Because the rules contradict each other. The rules explicitly say that under no circumstances are we allowed to use a weapon to harm the proctor. But if we were supposed to confirm the monster's identity, we'd have to stab the target with the tactical dagger. Those two conditions create a fatal contradiction in logic." After hearing that, the girl beside him showed the kind of relief people only wear after narrowly escaping death. "Jack, thank God you were here. Otherwise, all of us really would have been dead." However, as the seconds kept slipping away, the situation once again sank into a tense deadlock. In order to end this damned exam as quickly as possible, someone finally pointed a military dagger at his own classmates and said, "Do you want the system to erase you at random? If not, I've got a ruthless solution." Someone asked in a trembling voice. "What solution?" "Did you find the monster?" The white school bully holding the knife twisted his mouth into a warped grin. "No, I didn't find the answer. But I did find another way to stay alive. As long as we kill people until only half the class is left, the ones doing the killing will survive." At that moment, the already fragile order of the classroom finally collapsed for good. In less than 10 minutes, yet another class had forced its way into passing the exam. When everyone saw those students walking out into the hallway, drenched in blood, like the living dead, the students in the other classrooms instantly understood what kind of human slaughter had taken place in there. Just then, the cold voice of the school broadcast echoed down the hall. "Attention, all examinees. There are 15 minutes remaining before the exam ends. Any students who have not yet submitted an answer should do so as soon as possible." By now, even Jack's own class had fallen into severe chaos. Despair was written all over the students' faces. "Jack, is this exam just impossible to pass? If even someone as smart as Jack can't find a way out, then there's no path to survival at all. Half of us are definitely going to die here." But instead of panicking, Jack sank into even deeper thought. He understood better than anyone that the more dangerous the environment and the tighter the situation became, the more he needed the absolute calm of a US Special Forces soldier. Right then, a familiar sound entered his ears once again. It was the kind of sound so common in an old high school classroom that almost every student had long since treated it as white noise and instinctively tuned it out. A cold smile slowly appeared at the corner of Jack's mouth. "So that's how deep you buried yourself. In my last life, I was fooled by you too. But this time, I'm dragging you out into the open." As he spoke, Jack suddenly pulled out his tactical dagger. In an instant, every eye in the classroom locked onto him, as if he were their savior. "Look!" Jack's making his move. He definitely found that damned monster. Then, they saw Jack walk straight up to a girl with dreadlocks. In a cold voice, he said, "I know you're hiding right here." But even as Jack approached, the girl said nothing at all. She only stared at him, without blinking. The whole class erupted at once. "Does Jack think it's Chloe?" Someone immediately jumped in to object. "That's impossible. Chloe talked earlier. If she's not talking now, it has to be because of Rule 4's silence restriction." In the very next second, Jack raised the military dagger and drove it down hard in Chloe's direction. What happened right after that left everyone completely dumbfounded. With a sharp crack, the old oak desk in front of Chloe was split clean in half by Jack's strike, and a strand of pungent sulfur-black smoke began rising out of it. In that instant, the entire testing hall fell into dead silence. A moment later, the classroom exploded into wild cheers like a Super Bowl championship celebration. The desk, the monster was that damn desk. Just then, the school broadcast rang out once more. "Jack of grade 12 class A has successfully found the answer. Congratulations, you may all go home." The proctor slowly stepped down from the platform, and even she clearly hadn't expected this high school student to actually crack the exam. "Still, I'm curious. How did you figure it out? There were so many desks in the classroom. What made you so certain that the monster was specifically the one in front of Chloe? It wasn't just the proctor." At that moment, every surviving student in the classroom was staring at Jack with the same burning curiosity. Jack only smiled. "Of course I worked it out from the rules describing the monster's traits. The rules said the monster had 4 arms and legs, just like a human, so naturally, all of us fell into the same assumption and thought the monster must be disguised as a person. To be honest, even I got trapped by that line of thinking at first. But very quickly, I noticed something was off in the first trait. The monster is lazy. Before you discover it, it usually doesn't move. Didn't any of you realize that this is actually a trait that puts the monster at a huge disadvantage? If the monster had really disguised itself as one of the students, yet still couldn't move at all, then wouldn't that basically give it away by itself? In theory, it should have been easy to identify. But the reality was the complete opposite. Not a single class was passing this exam easily, and that's exactly what proved that our understanding of the third trait had gone fatally wrong from the very beginning. Once I figured that out, the rest of the logic became much clearer. There are other things with 4 legs besides humans. The desks and chairs in a classroom fit that condition too. So the real question became this: out of all those desks and chairs, which one was the monster hiding in? And that's when the second trait became the key. The monster would occasionally make a beast-like cry. So when the classroom fell into its quietest moment, I carefully listened and caught 3 strange creaking sounds, like aged wood groaning. And every single one of those sounds came from the desk in front of Chloe. By the time he finished, the entire class was completely stunned. That kind of reasoning ability was practically on the level of an FBI criminal profiler. No wonder he was Jack. Even the proctor, who had always carried herself with cold arrogance, couldn't hide the trace of astonishment in her eyes. Someone this young with such meticulous judgment and such a deep head on his shoulders was something she had never seen before. Right then, Jack suddenly lifted his head toward the proctor and asked in a calm voice, "Officer, now that I've passed the SAT exam, do I qualify to meet your principal and chairman?" The proctor froze again at those words. In her eyes, if this had been anyone else, surviving a death exam like this would have made them want to run as far away as possible and never come back for the rest of their life. But Jack wasn't trying to escape at all. Instead, he was voluntarily asking to meet the Academy's true highest ruler. After a moment of silence, she finally said, "You've got courage. As the only examinee so far to find the answer through pure intelligence, you absolutely do qualify to request a meeting with the principal. That said, I am curious. Why do you want to see the principal? Are you after an Ivy League recommendation slot? Or some kind of special reward?" But Jack only shook his head. "Neither. What I want is to buy Nightfall Preparatory Academy outright." "What kind of joke is that? Buy the entire school?" The proctor's eyes widened at once, and for a second she almost thought she had heard him wrong. "Do you even know how much Nightfall Preparatory Academy is worth? We're talking about an asset worth tens of billions in nether dollars. That's real top-tier capital." When the students in the classroom heard that, they all turned to stare at Jack in complete shock. They had always known Jack was a rich kid, but a rich kid bold enough to casually announce that he wanted to buy an entire school conglomerate was still far beyond anything they could imagine. Seeing the proctor stare at him in disbelief, Jack couldn't be bothered to explain further. He simply pulled a delicate little gift box out of his spatial ring. When she opened it, she found a limited edition Cartier bracelet inside. The whole piece had been carved from premium abyss crystal, and a single bracelet like that sold for nearly 10,000 nether dollars. On her meager academic office salary, Even if she stopped eating and drinking entirely, she would still need 3 or 4 months to save up that much. Her attitude changed on the spot. "I'll take you to the principal's office right away." 10 minutes later, the two of them arrived outside the office with the chairman plaque hanging beside the door. The female proctor took a deep breath and lowered her voice. "The principal doesn't have the best temper. He especially hates being disturbed during afternoon tea. Once you go in, say what you need to say as quickly as possible. And whatever you do, don't make him angry." As the proctor raised her hand and knocked on the heavy redwood door, an impatient roar quickly came from inside. "Come in." Trembling, she pushed the door open and led Jack inside. "Your Excellency, this is Jack from grade 12. He requested an audience with you." The principal, dressed in a custom-tailored suit, slowly lifted his head, his eyes full of the displeasure of someone powerful whose peace had been interrupted. "What exactly is this supposed to be? A lowly human high schooler thinks he belongs in my office? Are you trying to get expelled and lose your life along with it?" That furious outburst scared the female proctor so badly that her whole body started shaking. Just as the atmosphere was about to freeze solid, Jack suddenly put on the smooth, unreadable smile of a Wall Street politician. "Principal, pardon the intrusion. It's just a small gift, nothing worth mentioning." As he spoke, he pulled out an entire box of smuggled Cuban cigars and premium Scotch whiskey. That instantly left even the principal a little wrong-footed. In a capital-driven world, nobody slapped away a smiling guest carrying hard currency through the door. But before the man could fully process it, Jack immediately followed up by taking out a velvet presentation box. Inside was a Nether Rolex Submariner worth more than 300,000 Nether dollars. At that point, the principal finally broke. "Ah, Jack, what are you doing? This is far too generous. As a principal, I've always appreciated smart students who understand how the world works." The contrast was so extreme that even the female proctor beside them was nearly dumbfounded. In all her years, she had never once seen this cold-blooded capitalist principal act this approachable. Clearing his throat, the principal frowned slightly and asked, "Did some blind fool of a teacher offend you? Don't worry, I'll dock his performance bonus immediately." Jack quickly waved his hand. No, it's not that. Principal, no need to rush. I also brought along a case of private reserve wine for you." With that, he took out an entire crate of Romane Conti from his spatial ring. But while pulling out the wine, Jack accidentally let that commander rank crest slip out along with it. It hit the thick Persian carpet with a loud metallic clatter. The principal glanced down and nearly had his eyes pop out of his skull. It was the family crest of a commander rank lord. His expression changed instantly, and he hurriedly invited Jack to sit with overwhelming warmth. He even brought out his own treasured hand-brewed coffee and personally poured Jack a cup with the utmost courtesy. "Jack, whatever request you have, just say it. As long as it's something I can do as principal, I'll make sure it's handled properly." Jack only smiled faintly. "It's nothing much. I just have one small acquisition request. I want to offer 10 billion in cash for full controlling ownership of Nightfall Preparatory Academy." The moment those words came out, the principal sprayed coffee all over himself. The latest valuation on Nightfall Preparatory Academy is only a little over 7 billion. "Are you seriously planning to acquire it at a 10 billion premium?" Jack nodded. "Which means your board has absolutely no reason to reject this offer." Jack knew very well that in the middle and later stages of the paranormal apocalypse, Nightfall Preparatory Academy would grow into a massive education conglomerate whose influence would rival even the Nether Federal Reserve Bank. By that point, it wouldn't be an asset that could still be bought for mere tens of billions. What looked like an overpriced deal now was in reality a top-tier high-yield risk investment. As he said that, Jack swept out one hand. Piles of crisp, brand-new Nether bills instantly flooded the spacious office like a mountain of cash. The principal stood there utterly dumbstruck. In his entire life, even in his wildest dreams, he had never seen this much real cash stacked in one place. The proctor beside him was so shaken that she dropped straight back onto the sofa. It took the principal several full minutes to barely recover from the sheer shock of that monstrous display of capital. Taking a deep breath, he finally said in a low voice, "Mr. Jack, your financial power has gone far beyond anything I imagined. I admit it. The cash in your hands is enough to force an acquisition of Nightfall Preparatory Academy. But I still can't sell it to you, because at this point, it's no longer just a matter of money, and it also falls outside the board's procedural authority. To tell you the truth, the moment you buy Nightfall Academy, you'll violate the Abyss contract rules." Jack frowned slightly, a trace of confusion flashing through his eyes. "Rules? What rules?" The principal wiped the sweat from his brow and answered in a low voice, "The truth is, this school doesn't belong to me personally. I merely manage it on behalf of a group of hidden board members from Wall Street, and those people already put together a whole set of extremely brutal terms, including one specifically for any attempt to acquire the school. The rules clearly state that although Nightfall Preparatory Academy is valued at 7 billion nether dollars, if the buyer is human, then the purchase price drops to a symbolic 100 million. Jack, you're smart enough to see it, aren't you? This is nothing but a vicious financial trap. They even added another clause into the legal contract, stating that once a human buys Nightfall Academy, the very moment that person signs the transfer agreement, the system will immediately execute them under its death rule. Normally, I should never have revealed the second hidden clause of a business secret like this, but considering how much hard currency you've handed me, I decided to warn you anyway. Hearing that, even Jack felt a jolt in his heart. The board members behind Nightfall Academy really were a pack of Wall Street wolves who devoured people whole. A top academy worth a full 7 billion, yet anyone could seemingly acquire it for only 100 million. That kind of 90% discount was the sort of temptation almost no investment banker or capitalist in the world could resist. In his previous life, Jack had once heard of a financial titan who somehow scraped together 100 million in starting capital within just 2 years. And at the exact moment he did, he happened to run into Nightfall Academy being sold off at 1/10 of its value. The man had signed the acquisition agreement almost without a second thought. At the time, the deal made countless people in the industry and all kinds of retail investors insanely jealous. But later, that financial giant vanished from the world completely, along with the entire 100 million he had brought to the table. So it turned out he hadn't stumbled into the bargain of a lifetime. He had walked straight into a contract trap the board had built in advance. After thinking for a moment, Jack suddenly lifted his eyes and looked at the principal, whose forehead was now slick with cold sweat. Principal, I've made up my mind. I still want to acquire full ownership of Nightfall Preparatory Academy for 100 million. That single sentence completely stunned the principal. What did you just say? You know signing means death, and you still insist on going through with the acquisition. Even the female proctor at the side was frozen in disbelief. She genuinely couldn't understand how a man who could casually gift away luxury bracelets worth 10,000 could also throw away his own young life that easily. The principal stared hard at Jack and asked one last time, have you really thought this through? Yes. 100 million is an absurd bargain, but I'm afraid you'll be alive to buy it and dead before you ever get to spend a cent. Yet, seeing how unwavering Jack remained, the principal finally gave up trying to persuade him. He turned around and took out an extremely thick legal contract from the safe. Though he himself was not one of the board members, Wall Street's board had granted him full proxy authority to execute the contract. After all, those board members understood better than anyone that with Abyss rules in place, no human should have been able to survive buying Nightfall Preparatory Academy. The principal slowly pushed the contract in front of Jack and said in a deep voice, the moment you sign this, you will hold absolute control and ownership of Nightfall Preparatory Academy. But let me remind you one last time. The instant you sign, you will also trigger the system's death sentence rule. Jack, however, did not hesitate for even a heartbeat. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen and signed his name across the last page in one smooth motion. Seeing that, the principal could only let out a helpless sigh. He inwardly cursed that good advice truly could not save a man determined to die. He had already made the danger as clear as possible, yet this rich kid still insisted on marching straight toward death. The female proctor standing nearby was just as baffled. She simply could not understand where Jack's confidence was coming from. But the moment the signature was completed, a terrifying force surged violently into Jack's body. Carrying a dark and savage aura, that power rampaged through his blood vessels and organs as if it intended to tear him apart from the inside out. This was the true force unleashed when absolute rules came down in full. Yet at the critical moment, an invisible layer of heavy armor suddenly unfolded inside Jack's body and shielded his vital organs completely. The brutal force of the rule crashed madly in every direction, but no matter how violently it raged, it could not break through that top-tier defense. In the end, the rule's killing force slowly dissipated, and at that exact moment, the vast Nightfall Preparatory Academy officially fell into Jack's hands and became his private property. When the principal and the female proctor saw that Jack was completely unharmed, their faces filled with the kind of shock people wore when they thought they had just seen a ghost. They simply could not believe that someone had actually withstood an abyss rule head-on. That was nothing short of defying heaven itself. The female proctor looked completely lost. With her low-level clearance, there was no way she could have known about a strategic-grade artifact like the Reaper Heavy Tactical Armor. But the principal was different. He was already half a step into commander rank, so of course he had heard the armor's terrifying reputation whispered about on the black market. It was the only epic-grade piece of equipment in the entire paranormal apocalypse, said to be capable of directly resisting the power of rules. Rumor had it that the Vampire Duke had fought for days and nights against more than a dozen commander-rank lords, just to seize it. At that moment, the principal suddenly remembered the pure gold crest Jack had accidentally dropped earlier. It was unmistakably the insignia of the Vampire Duke's family. The moment that thought clicked into place, he no longer dared underestimate this human's background in the slightest. Meanwhile, Jack couldn't help feeling secretly pleased. Nightfall Preparatory Academy was nothing less than an Ivy League fast track for the supernatural elite. Most of its resident professors had already reached elite rank. Even the principal himself had stepped into the threshold of commander rank. And from this day forward, all of that upper-tier power would belong to Jack. By the time Jack walked out of the campus, it was already midnight. News that he had fully acquired Nightfall Preparatory Academy had already exploded across the dark web. To avoid getting swarmed by overeager student council members trying to latch onto him, Jack deliberately took a side route home through Brooklyn. But just then, a bitter wind suddenly swept through the street. The dim streetlights flickered twice, then went out all at once. Jack knew exactly what that meant. It was the classic sign that a street gang or a pack of wandering ghosts had set their sights on him. Sure enough, in the very next second, several figures slowly emerged from the pitch-black alley. They wore cheap synthetic suits, wrinkled ties, and carried briefcases in their hands. At a glance, they really did look like a pack of Wall Street salesmen. The ghost leading them forced a stiff smile onto his face. "We're from Payday Loan Services. May we ask whether you had any short-term financing needs?" Jack gave a small wave of dismissal. "Sorry, I don't." "Sir, perhaps you should at least look over our contract first. Borrow $100,000 and the annual interest is only $100. You could literally dump the money into Chase and collect interest, and you'd still make a few thousand a year risk-free." He kept feeding Jack that seductive pig-butchering pitch, clearly convinced that someone with a college student look like Jack would be the easiest kind of target to scam. But Jack only let out a dry laugh. "So that's the game? You want to play financial word tricks with me? If I actually signed that contract, the money you'd hand over would probably just be ordinary human US dollars. But when I came back to repay the debt, your legal department would jump right out and tell me the contract actually says the repayment has to be made in nether dollars. For an ordinary person, forget 100 nether dollars. Even if they sold a kidney, they still wouldn't be able to come up with that kind of money. So spare me this bottom-feeder financial scam. You're not fooling anyone here." The faces of the loan sharks changed instantly. A human, who still looked like a student, had actually seen through their whole game at a single glance. But before they could recover, Jack smiled and spoke again. "From the look of it, your ratings aren't bad. You're all at least elite rank. Interested in doing contract work for my security company as mercenaries?" The moment they heard that, the ghosts flew into a rage. Elite rank paranormal beings working as security guards for a human was, to them, nothing short of an insult to their dignity. One of them roared on the spot. "The apocalypse is already here. Sooner or later, all humanity will be trampled under the feet of our supernatural race. And you, a mere human, think you're qualified to hire us?" Jack, however, only lifted a hand calmly and motioned for them to settle down. "Relax. I haven't even made the formal offer yet. Luxury apartment, 3 meals a day, and a starting base salary of 10,000 nether dollars. On top of that, you'd get chef-prepared staff meals from the Midnight Hotel, plus a monthly shopping benefits card, paid vacation, and generous year-end bonuses." The salesmen were left staring blankly. To them, the package sounded like the kind of fantasy deal only a top Silicon Valley giant would dangle in the air. There was no way a human could actually be offering something this good. In the entire city, there was probably only one person who could really afford benefits like that. The capital monster rumored to have bought both the Midnight Hotel and Nightfall Academy, Boss Jack. But just as that thought flashed across one ghost's mind, his eyes suddenly widened. "Wait, you just said the Midnight Hotel. Don't tell me you're..." Jack chuckled and flicked out a business card. "Almost forgot to introduce myself. My name's Jack." The lone shark ghosts instantly lit up with excitement. "So you're Boss Jack." To them, this was like a pie falling out of the sky. No, more like getting handed a NASDAQ bell-ringing moment by fate itself. They immediately switched to the most flattering expressions imaginable and asked with eager smiles, "Boss Jack, so when do you want us working for you?" Jack handed over employee ID cards embedded with chips and told them they could head to the Midnight Hotel right now to complete their onboarding. And in Jack's mind, the plan was already set. Start with this security squad, then slowly build it into a true PMC of his own. a private military company made up of paranormal troops. By the time he stepped out of the side street, his private ghost taxi was already waiting for him at the curb. The moment he got in, Jack told the driver to head for Beverly Flowing Estate. In his view, it was finally time to buy himself a real top-tier mansion. In his previous life, he had been nothing more than another overworked nobody, stuck renting a rundown apartment in Queens for his entire life. But in this life, with enormous capital in his hands, he naturally intended to enjoy the kind of lifestyle that truly belonged to the wealthy elite. And he had already chosen his target, Beverly Flowing Estate, the most exclusive rich district in the entire city. Even before the apocalypse, property prices there had already reached the absurd level of tens of thousands of US dollars per square meter. The old him could have worked for thousands of years without eating or drinking, and still wouldn't have been able to buy even a single bathroom there. Jack casually ran through the numbers in his head. Not long ago, he had picked up the Midnight Hotel at a bargain price for just $7.5 million. Yet, after only 2 days of operation, the hotel had already brought him more than $2 million in clean nether dollar cash flow. After that, he spent over $10 million on gifts for the Vampire Duke. But what he got in return was a commander-rank suit of armor worth well over $1 billion on the black market. As for Nightfall Preparatory Academy, which had originally been valued at $7 billion, he had acquired full ownership of it for only $100 million. After running through all of that, Jack realized his cash reserves hadn't shrunk at all. In fact, the more he spent, the more money seemed to pile up, to the point where it almost felt impossible to run out. 20 minutes later, the taxi rolled to a stop just outside the gates of Beverly Flowing Estate. The driver told Jack that the entire estate community had been sealed off by a high-intensity rule barrier and no vehicle could get through. But instead of being disappointed, Jack's face broke into a deeply satisfied smile. This place actually came with a system-level rule barrier built in as a security wall, which meant that once he bought the whole estate, unless some monster on the outside could crack the underlying rule code itself, no one would be able to force their way in. This was practically the perfect doomsday fortress. The only problem was that before any of that, he still needed to find a way inside and inspect the place for himself. But just as Jack was standing there in thought, a dark figure suddenly appeared outside the estate's ornate iron gate. By now, this whole area had already become a high-risk paranormal zone, so a few wandering zombies or evil spirits nearby should have been the most normal thing in the world. Yet when that shadow came stumbling closer, Jack couldn't help looking surprised. It was actually a living human being. The man saw Jack the way a stranded survivor would see a rescue helicopter and started sprinting toward him like his life depended on it. As he ran, he shouted hysterically, "Sir, please, are you looking to buy a house?" The young real estate agent came charging forward in a panic. He suddenly smashed face first into an invisible air wall with a heavy thud, leaving himself bruised and dazed. Clearly, this rule barrier wasn't just keeping outsiders from going in, it was also trapping the people inside and preventing them from getting out. In that instant, with the memories of his previous life lining up in his head, Jack suddenly understood the hidden rule structure of this place. Reaching through the barrier, he took the brochure from the agent's hand and said with a slight grin, "Of course, I was just thinking about investing in a few luxury homes." The moment he said that, a line of blood-red system text was projected across his vision. Paranormal mission, Beverly Flowing Estate, a top-tier collection of linked villas located in the wealthy district. It was once a playground for Wall Street tycoons and Hollywood celebrities to burn money in style. That was until the apocalypse descended and all class divisions shattered. Now this estate longs for a new master. In the very next moment, the air barrier that had seemed completely unbreakable split open like a zipper, creating a narrow passage. A cold smile tugged at Jack's lips. Interesting. So this was a hidden multi-level recruitment style mission. It turned out that in the apocalypse, paranormal scenarios roughly fell into two categories at the foundational level. One was the fixed instance type. Those maps usually had limited physical range and didn't shift around much. The Mist Metropolis Museum was one of those. The other kind was the viral expansion type, and those were the ones that truly made people's scalps go numb in the apocalypse. As the paranormal age advanced, those scenarios would spread like cancer cells, swallowing up and expanding across real physical territory. In the later stages, some ultra-large scenarios could even force tens of thousands of people inside at once for a full-scale battle royale. The Midnight Hotel and Nightfall Academy were both examples of high-potential expansion-type scenarios, and the Beverly Flowing Estate in front of him was an extreme mutant strain within that category. Its early-stage purpose wasn't efficient killing at all. It was all about aggressively pulling in more people and expanding its reach. Victims who stumbled into it could only earn the right to leave alive if they acted like real estate agents and lured in enough buyers to take the bag. And that was exactly why offering to buy property was the only pass that could make the air barrier open on its own. The moment Jack stepped into Flowing Estate, the first thing he saw was a scene that looked like Detroit after total bankruptcy. He paused for half a beat. It really was just like the mission text described. The once luxurious mansion district was now choked with weeds and rotting into ruin. Right then, a vampire agent in an Armani suit with a developer badge pinned to his chest walked out. The moment he saw Jack, he let out a dismissive scoff, clearly assuming this was just another sucker who had been lured in. "Hey kid, what exactly are you standing here looking around and calculating for?" Jack let out a soft sigh, sounding as casual as if you were discussing renovation costs. "I'm wondering how much in property management and restoration I'll need to pour in once I buy the whole place." The paranormal agent found the whole thing absurd. This human was way too full of himself. Did he seriously think buying property here was as cheap as grabbing a hot dog off the street? With a sneer, he asked, "Kid, do you even know what level of money it takes to buy out the property rights to every villa in this place?" He held up one hand in a deliberately mysterious gesture. "At least this much. 50 million nether dollars up front. You think you can handle that?" But Jack lit up like he had just found a lamb ripe for slaughter. "Only 50 million? That's dirt cheap. I'll take all of it." At those words, the paranormal agent froze like his brain had short-circuited. For a second, he honestly wondered if this human had some kind of mental illness. Even after all his years of deception and hustling, his total net worth barely reached a little over 2 million. How could an ordinary human cough up a number like that? But to Jack, a reborn player with future knowledge, paying only 50 million to bottom fish an entire elite district was almost laughably cheap. Give the apocalypse another year or two, and rare land like Flowing Estate, with a natural rule-based security barrier built in, would absolutely skyrocket in value. By then, forget doubling in price. Even jumping by dozens of times wouldn't be surprising. Hell, people might even sell it as a doomsday shelter by the square centimeter. This deal was practically the definition of an angel round investment you almost couldn't lose. Jack casually clapped his hands once. Stack after stack of brand new nether cash, bound tight with anti-counterfeit seals, appeared out of thin air on the asphalt like a magic trick, glowing an eerie green under the cold moonlight. The very picture of money-stinking greed. The paranormal agent's eyes nearly popped out of his skull, and his gaze filled with uncontrollable shock. A smug capitalist smile curled across Jack's lips as he urged him on in a calm voice. "Quit stalling and bring out the transfer contract. This 50 million is enough to buy out the entire Beverly Flowing Estate." The paranormal agent nodded so hard he looked like a pecking chicken. His hands were shaking with excitement as he hurriedly pulled out a thick transfer agreement. But at the very last second, just as Jack was about to sign and the deal was nearly done, he suddenly yanked the contract back and changed his mind on the spot. A distinctly Wall Street kind of greed and cunning rose in his eyes. If this human could toss out 50 million in cash that casually, then the price he had quoted before was obviously way too conservative. And after sizing up Jack's aura again, he saw that this brat was only at early enforcer rank, while he himself was at least mid-enforcer rank, not to mention that this was his home turf. As an insider, he could bend the HOA, the Homeowners Association rules, however he pleased, so there was no way he wasn't going to jack up the price and bleed this mystery rich kid for a whole lot more. He instantly switched to the face of a shameless street hustler and gave Jack a crooked smile. "Aw man, my bad. I forgot to read you the residency rules for this estate. Once you enter Beverly Flowing Estate, if you want to leave alive, you have to complete 2 mandatory conditions. First, you must use 100 million nether dollars to purchase a single detached villa inside the estate. Second, you must invite at least 2 wealthy friends under their real names to come attend a party at your new home." Jack sneered inwardly at once. Selling him the entire estate for 50 million would have already been one thing. But now this bastard saw he had money and not only tried to jack the price up to 100 million while selling just 1 villa instead of the whole district. He was even insane enough to demand that Jack drag in 2 rich friends so the parasite could line up his next batch of victims to butcher. If Jack's read on the system's hidden logic was right, those 2 brutal rules were originally supposed to be an either-or survival option for players. Since this damned capitalist bloodsucker wanted to get sneaky with him, Jack was going to make sure that today, not only would this thing walk away without a single cent, it would end up kneeling and transferring the whole estate to him. But outwardly, Jack acted like he had swallowed the bait and said with a grin, "Sure, no problem. I actually do have a few rich buddies who've been complaining they never have a good place to throw a party." The paranormal agent was over the moon. In his eyes, this guy was the perfect mark. Rich, stupid, and easy to steer, and he had fallen for the pitch almost laughably fast. He quickly pulled out 2 premium black invitation cards, stamped in gold, and handed them over to Jack. Just fill in your invitation details on these. Once they step into the estate holding the cards and the system verifies them, you'll be free to leave safely. Of course, before that, you'll need to settle the 100 million for the villa. To his surprise, Jack took the 2 cards, looked at them with open disdain and laughed. Only 2 slots? That's kind of cheap, don't you think? My upper class circle is a lot bigger than that. I'll need at least 4 if you want me to have enough to hand out. The paranormal agent was completely dumbstruck. He had seen plenty of ruthless people before, but never someone willing to be this vicious to his own friends. In the agent's eyes, Jack was obviously planning to save himself by shoving his whole friend group into the furnace. He was a born Wall Street grade piece of human trash. Jack picked up a pen and smoothly wrote across the gold-trimmed invitation cards, "My dear old friend, today I stumbled into the kind of insane luck people only dream about, the kind of deal that feels like money falling straight out of the sky. The bankrupt owner of Beverly Flowing Estate has apparently lost his mind and wants to hand over the entire estate to me for free. When one man strikes it rich, he shouldn't forget his brothers. So of course I want to share this ridiculous fortune with you. Once you receive this invitation, bring your people and get to the estate immediately, and I'll personally show you around the top-tier real estate project we're about to take over together." The paranormal agent stood nearby and watched Jack finish writing the invitations, nodding with obvious satisfaction. In his vicious little worldview, Jack was no different from all the other desperate suckers he had seen before. Once they got cornered, they would say absolutely anything just to lure more people in to take the fall for them. To a guy like that, lying through his teeth was second nature. Even bragging that he had taken over the whole estate at 0 cost was just standard scammer talk. While waiting for the system to send the invitations out, the paranormal agent finally couldn't suppress his curiosity anymore and began fishing around for details about the wealth and background of Jack's so-called friends. Jack pretended to think seriously for a second, then answered with casual indifference. They're just ordinary working people. They might have a little bit of authority at their companies, maybe some savings too, but nothing that makes them real movers and shakers." Hearing that, the last bit of doubt in the agent's heart finally disappeared. These were the perfect lambs for slaughter, rich enough to bleed, weak enough that no major power would come knocking afterward. So he rubbed his hands greedily and urged Jack on. "Well, since we're waiting anyway, why don't you go ahead and settle that 100 million down payment now, so we can start the paperwork early?" Jack looked at him like he was an idiot and waved him off. "What's the rush? You're a pretty lousy agent if you ask me. The least you could do is show me the property first. Once we've confirmed everything and signed the final transfer agreement, I can pay the remaining balance then. Of course, that assumes that when the contract comes out later, you still have the nerve to ask me for money." The paranormal agent was left momentarily baffled by that line. What did he mean by still daring to ask for money later? To him, the whole thing sounded absurd. This was a business deal. Since when did anyone hand over a villa for free? Not long after, the agent led Jack down a gravel path to a derelict villa with pewing walls and a roof full of holes. He pointed at it and said, "There you go. That's the unit you picked. 100 million nether dollars, fixed price. Not 1 cent less." Jack looked at the sagging porch and frowned slightly. This rotting wooden shack looked fit for nothing except as a shooting location in a horror movie. Forget 100 million. He wouldn't even want it for free. Just then, a harsh burst of crow calls tore through the gloomy night sky, followed by the cold mechanical chime of the system. A new invited guest has entered the Beverly Flowing Estate zone. In the next second, an unexpected figure in a high-end tailored suit stepped into the front courtyard, beneath the weak yellow spill of the streetlights, walking with perfect calm. The paranormal agent took one look and froze as if struck by lightning, even rubbing his eyes like he thought he was hallucinating. Because the man approaching was none other than the general manager of Fallen Mall, one of the figures who effectively controlled the economic lifeline of the entire city. As a low-level nobody working within the system, the agent understood better than anyone just how terrifying Fallen Mall's weight and status really were in the paranormal world. In this metropolis, the number of true monopolistic giants who controlled real power and immense capital could practically be counted on one hand. Midnight Hotel, Nightfall Preparatory Academy, Dread Private Hospital, Fallen Mall, and then only a few others, like the aloof and untouchable Mist Metropolis Museum. He had dreamed for years of getting his hands on even the most basic VIP card from Fallen Mall, but to this day, every time he spent money there, he still had to line up through the ordinary customer entrance like everyone else. On a normal day, even if he actually knelt outside the mall begging for a meeting, the guards would throw him out like a stray dog before he ever got near the general manager, which meant that this impossibly high-ranking mall executive, could he really be one of the friends with a little money that this so-called poor student had just mentioned? And then, under the agent's horrified stare, the manager of Fallen Mall, a figure who normally stood far above people like him, respectfully presented a velvet gift box to Jack with both hands and said in an almost reverent tone, "Mr. Jack, you are our most distinguished Centurion Black Gold client. On behalf of the entire board of Fallen Mall, I've come to congratulate you on successfully acquiring a new property. Please accept this small housewarming gift." Jack casually flipped open the class on the gift box, only to find a top-grade Deep Abyss Blood Jade glowing with an eerie inner light, conservatively valued at over $1 million. The ghost realtor's heart seized on the spot. A Centurion Black Gold client? That wasn't just a status money could buy. It represented absolute power. A terrifying sense of impending doom immediately slithered up his spine like a venomous snake. But before he could recover from the shock, the morning crow on the roof let out another shrill cry. A sharp rhythm of high heels followed. A stunning female ghost in a blood-red evening gown strode into the villa with 6 murderous elite-rank mob bodyguards at her back, her presence overwhelming the entire room. Lilith, executive president of the Midnight Hotel, reporting under orders to congratulate the big boss on acquiring his new estate. The ghost realtor nearly blacked out on the spot, his legs turning weak. The Midnight Hotel? Another monopolistic giant that ruled an entire region had just shown up. Wait, what had Lilith just called him? The big boss? Did that mean this seemingly ordinary human was actually the hidden power who had just forcefully acquired the Midnight Hotel? Then the crow in the sky let out its third hoarse cry. The ghost realtor's soul shuddered violently, like he was waiting for the final announcement of a death sentence. A few seconds later, a middle-aged man in a perfectly tailored suit and gold-rimmed glasses walked into the drafty villa hall with a grim expression. It was the iron-blooded principal of Nightfall Preparatory Academy. The principal's first words nearly made the already collapsing ghost realtor die on the spot. Principal of Nightfall Preparatory Academy, here, on behalf of the board, to congratulate Chairman Jack on his new home. Chairman? This human had silently swallowed the entire academy and become its supreme board chairman. The ghost realtor felt like crying without tears. He wanted nothing more than to slap himself across the face. This was the ordinary working guy he had just casually described as not being anyone important. Since when were ordinary workers regional capital overlords? Before his overloaded brain could even begin rebooting from one nuclear-grade shock after another death knell-like crow cry sounded from the roof. By now, the ghost realtor's entire mind had gone numb. His psychological defenses were completely shattered. Did this nightmare seriously still not end? Any one of the 3 guests who had already arrived could have crushed him like an ant. So what kind of apocalyptic monster would this final 4th guest turn out to be? He didn't even dare imagine it. Moments later, a suffocating commander rank pressure rolled in from outside the villa like a tidal wave. Even as an elite rank ghost, he couldn't remain standing under that force. His knees buckled and he dropped to the floor. In the next second, the vampire duke in a black trench coat appeared at the villa entrance as if he had teleported there. "Brother Jack, the second I received your private urgent invitation, I canceled every engagement I had and came straight over to see your new real estate project for myself." Jack shot the kneeling realtor a half-smiling glance and shrugged. "Well, aren't we already standing in this so-called new home? It's just that this black-hearted developer here quoted me $100 million in cash and tried to force sell me this luxury villa." The vampire duke's face twisted in disbelief. $100 million? You're telling me this drafty doghouse was being sold for $100 million? Then the duke's gaze, cold and sharp as a blade, locked onto the ghost realtor cowering in the corner. "You've got some nerve. You actually tried to scam my most honored sworn ally out of $100 million with a pile of trash like this." The ghost realtor was so terrified he wet himself on the spot, urine running straight down his dress pants. He could hear it clearly. The duke's words were openly backing this terrifying human capital shark. He knew better than anyone that if he dared admit at a moment like this that he really had been trying to extort Jack, he would probably be ripped into flying chunks of flesh by the duke's blood magic in the very next second. He immediately shook his head like a rattling drum and frantically waved his hands in denial. A misunderstanding. A huge misunderstanding. Nothing like that happened at all. What I said just now was just an immature little joke between me and Boss Jack. For a great man as powerful as Boss Jack to take interest in a dump like ours is already an honor for us. If Boss Jack says the word, forget this one house, I'm willing to hand over the ownership of the entire Beverly Flowing estate to you, for free. At this point, his guts were practically turning green with regret. If only he had investigated the true identity of this sheep-clothed human tycoon earlier. Forget charging him 50 million, he would have gladly paid 5 million out of his own pocket just to beg Jack to move in. As long as he could cash in this favor and latch onto a conglomerate leg this thick, he might have escaped this backwater hellhole on the spot and stepped straight into the decision-making circle of high society. But now, not only had he personally destroyed this once-in-a-lifetime chance to climb the class ladder, he had also managed to offend every top-tier powerhouse in the city in one shot. With a thud, the paranormal realtor dropped straight to his knees on the ground. Holding the thick property transfer contract out with both hands, tears and snot all over his face, he choked out, "Boss Jack, this is the transfer agreement for Beverly Flowing Estate. I'm willing to offer you all 46 top-tier villas as a sign of my respect. If you won't sign it, then I'll stay on my knees on this asphalt until I die." Jack scratched his head and deliberately put on a troubled expression. "But you were the one who just said 100 million, not a cent less?" The paranormal agent nearly burst into tears on the spot and started slamming his head against the ground in desperation. Only then did Jack smile and turn to the Duke. "See? I told you. This developer is actually pretty generous." After hearing that, the paranormal realtor didn't dare show the slightest hint of reluctance. Jack then picked up the Mont Blanc pen and signed his name across the contract in one clean stroke. In an instant, a powerful surge of abyss rule force slammed into Jack's body. At that moment, he could feel it with perfect clarity. The entire Beverly Flowing estate was now under his absolute controlling ownership, and with it, his strength rose smoothly from early elite rank to mid-elite rank. Jack quickly ran the numbers in his head. Flowing Estate contained a total of 46 top-tier town villas. The biggest and most luxurious of them all was naturally the crown villa of the entire estate. It sat on a private property spanning tens of thousands of square feet. It came complete with an infinity-heated pool and a private tennis court. It even had its own helipad and a full standard golf course. As for the remaining 45 villas, their size and degree of luxury varied from one to another. But with this many prime assets, there was obviously no way Jack could ever live in all of them by himself. So he casually waved a hand and pointed at one of the villas. "Your Grace, if you don't mind, I'd like to give you this mansion as your vacation home." A look of genuine surprise immediately appeared on the Duke's pale face. A property worth tens of millions of nether dollars, and Jack was just handing it over to him like that. But in Jack's mind, there was already a much longer-term capital strategy at work. Beverly Flowing Estate did come with an underlying barrier rule that made it very difficult for outsiders to break in. But if a real commander rank lord ever showed up, what exactly was Jack supposed to use to stop him? If he waited until then and asked the Duke for help, he would not only burn a huge favor, he would also have to pay an outrageous hiring price on top of it. In that case, it was far smarter to simply gift the Duke one of the properties now. This would make Flowing Estate one of the Duke's own holdings as well. That way, if hostile forces ever invaded in the future, the Duke would not need to be asked. For the sake of protecting his own private property, he would move without hesitation. More importantly, if a commander rank figure permanently resided here, the overall land value of Flowing Estate would without question skyrocket several times over. And if Jack later gifted another 10 or so villas to Wall Street elites and political power brokers of the apocalypse, turning this place into a top-tier billionaire club and power center of the paranormal age would be more than possible. Watching the Duke casually receive a sky-high luxury mansion, Lilith and the principal couldn't hide the envy and jealousy in their eyes. But they also understood perfectly well that they were only elite rank. Even if Jack really did offer them one, they might not have the standing to accept a gift of that level. Yet, to their surprise, Jack smiled and looked directly at both of them. "You two helped a lot tonight as well. There are still plenty of villas left in Flowing Estate, and I've already reserved spots for both of you. As long as your year-end performance hits the target, I'll give one to each of you for free as an executive benefit." At that point, Jack turned his attention to the general manager of Fallen Mall. "Manager, out of the dozens of properties I'm holding now, A lot of them have already been trashed down to shell condition and need full renovation. So I want the best construction teams available to rebuild those villas from the ground up. As for the building materials and high-end custom furniture, I plan to source everything through your mall. The manager was instantly thrilled. Renovating a Beverly luxury home would cost at least several million nether dollars. The Crown Villa alone could swallow tens of millions without breaking a sweat if it was done to full ultra-luxury spec. This meant this was a massive order worth hundreds of millions. He understood it immediately. Jack was clearly pulling him closer and handing him a huge performance win at the same time. Mr. Jack, you have my word. If the final result doesn't satisfy you, I'll jump off Rockefeller Center myself. Once all the property transfers and follow-up arrangements had been settled, Jack began preparing his next acquisition target. That was the only private medical institution in all of New York, Dread General Hospital. It had originally been nothing more than a bankrupt neighborhood hospital, abandoned after a medical malpractice disaster. But in the second week of the paranormal apocalypse, it transformed into a survival instance and gradually evolved into a top-tier medical center, specializing in treating dark creatures. And as the number of monsters in the apocalypse exploded exponentially, the hospital's VIP rooms and emergency beds would soon become so scarce that even a single opening would be priceless. By that stage, even commander-rank heavyweights would not dare casually offend the medical resources controlled by that hospital. Yet, at this early stage of the apocalypse, Dread General Hospital's finances were buried in a severe deficit. This was mainly because the number of dark creatures currently manifesting in the real world was still relatively limited, while humanity's firepower remained far too primitive to inflict any truly meaningful damage on them, which meant there simply weren't that many paranormal beings who actually needed to come here for trauma care. Jack saw the situation at once. This was the perfect window to launch a hostile acquisition and bottom-fish Dread General Hospital at a bargain. So the following night, Jack took his private ghost taxi to a remote wasteland in the Bronx. There, rising out of the darkness, stood a sprawling Gothic complex, Dread General Hospital. The moment Jack pushed open the rusted revolving door, lines of blood-red text immediately appeared across his vision. Paranormal mission. Midnight attending physician. You are a young doctor who has just graduated from medical school. With mediocre skills, repeated job rejections, and crushing student loans on your back, you are finally offered a position by a private hospital called Dread, where you will serve as the overnight ER resident on duty. Just then, a voice as cold and sharp as a scalpel cut through the darkness behind Jack. He turned and saw a female ghost in a blood-stained nurse's uniform standing there. You're the new ER doctor, assigned to the overnight shift, right? Come with me. The chief of surgery is already waiting inside. Before long, Jack followed her through a dim, damp corridor down to the operating room on basement level 2. The instant the sterilized door swung open, a thick wave of formalin and blood hit him straight in the face. In the center of the room sat a stainless steel operating table, covered with restraint straps meant to pin patients down, while the tray beside it was neatly lined with nightmare-inducing instruments like bone hammers and surgical saws. Hanging on the walls were medical licenses alongside plaques dripping with irony. Physician of the Year, Compassionate Healer, Saving Lives and Healing the Wounded. The white-haired ghost chief of surgery slowly raised his head and fixed Jack with cloudy eyes before saying in a dark voice, "So the rookie's finally here. This old bag of bones has at last got an intern to handle the dirty work for me."